Hello everyone. Let's see if this is working. Let's see if I can hear me. Is it working? Go live. Yes, I can hear myself. I don't like hearing myself in stereo, so headphones off. And da-da-da. Right then. We'll do a zoom in, so you don't have to see my washing bag. No, hopefully it does still show the washing bag. Let's see if we can't edit the washing bag out of this scenario. Sorry. Today's been a fun day. There you go, washing bag's gone. Today has been a fun day. More houses. Looking after poor mum. Leg infections are not good. Leg infections are not fun. And basically, I will admit that today, if I am burping a lot, it is not the normal problem I have at home, which seems to induce burping. It's because I'm probably surviving off iron brew alone, because I don't think I've actually managed to eat today, barring Pop-Tarts. Because every time I start to go and eat, something else happens. Or rather, every time I go and start to cook something. And although we have found a property which hopefully we're going to go to. When I say hopefully, I mean we've had a second viewing. We really liked it. Mum's going to have a viewing when she's better. Hopefully we can negotiate appropriately on the price. Come to a mutually acceptable terms. And then yes, then we will have a new home in Cornwall, which will be nice. The viewing was good. The house is very nice. There will be some differentials. I would think it's going to sound strange, but whilst there will need to be probably some form of lift implemented in the main building to assist Mum, especially until she gets her legs sorted out. The interesting thing is, mine is kind of the form I didn't want it to be, in that there is a room which is all sort of wired up for electronics. Doesn't have networked internet though, so I'm going to have to sort that out. No hardline cable. They've used a high frequency radio link, and said for their connections of the internet from one site to another. It might prove to be viable for me. I'll see. I'll test it out. But the trouble is, everything goes into the two rooms, which will be my section. And really, it's sort of 4 rooms anyway, because one's a gym which has ensuite, which I would turn into my office. As much as I'd like a gym, I need it more as an office. And one is a bedroom, kitchen, lounge with ensuite. So yeah, that'll need to be adapted. But yeah, that's life. Otherwise it's very, very good. So mine's the one that will need work, and mine will have work. Probably some wooden framing, etc., and some additions added on. Well, on the subject of FRAs, currently asleep. Not really that much of an assistance, but he is here. Hello Mark Harkness, hello Michael Hooch, hello Paul Amos, hello Leslie Mitchell, hello Rapper Isaac, hello Stephen Richards, hello DG40, hello Bob Fry, hello Byron Newman, hello Malaga, hello John Shea, hello Stafford, hello Geraint Thatcher, hello. Hello Colin Gasberg. No, I haven't seen a new Napoleon movie. Mainly because I wasn't impressed by Napoleon as a historical figure, let alone as a cinematic figure with the Hollywood touch. I don't think we'll need a mortgage. We've been specifically limiting our search to properties which should be able to be easily purchased for, well, should be able to purchase it for less than the price of our own should sell for. As that will free up sort of more funds for other things. It should be nice. This one has quite a big garden, which is quite nice to it. How David Gordon. And it's yeah, there should be quite a lot of good naval history that comes out from there. There is a little orchard as part of it, which is going to probably be quite attractive to a well, quite a lot of shipshape colleagues who quite like the concept of cider. So basically, come down. I've got pears and I've got apple trees. Not a massive distance from the spaceport, but far enough that we shouldn't be affected by launches. It's a nice position where we will be in. Broadly speaking, the wider Truro area. So, not all pears and apples make good cider. These ones seem to be good varieties to do so. Anyway, that's enough of me talking about myself. I guess I was going to have to, after last night having to delay the live due to, well, due to the joys that were, having to go to hospital and look after Mum and make sure she was okay. It is close to other family members, and it's close to the area we like. It's a nice place. It's a good place. There will be sort of, once we're in there and sorted up, you will probably get used to start getting to see some videos about it. I wouldn't be surprised if for a while I might be broadcasting from. It's going to depend how quickly I can move various signals, how it works out the sort of the high frequency radio link, whether that works out to be able to providing enough data transfer for my for the operation of everything I'm doing. Thank you, Visual. And if it is, that's going to be great. Then I don't need to stick in a hardwire cable. If I do need to stick in a hardwired cable, then it's going to be a case of micro trench and cable it is. Thank you. Thank you, Razorback. Rapper Razorback, and pass my thanks to Mrs. Razorback. Rapper Razorback, it's, you know, it's one of those annoying things. It happened while we were away, and she was more annoyed, I think, than anything about not being able to go and see the house today. She was really looking forward to going and seeing the place and sort of thinking about what we're going to be doing there, and, well, that just wasn't an option. It's sad, but it wasn't an option. But hopefully she'll get to see it next week. My confidence work is taking a hit. Last night on site, apparently I somehow managed to drill a 5/8-inch hole through PPC water main and some damage occurred. Stafford, even the best people, you do things enough times, life is going to happen. Some people like to say accidents happen, but no, it's life. Things can go wrong. Don't worry. It happens. We learn from it. We hopefully don't repeat it, but sometimes we do repeat it in very interesting different ways. It is Friday, not Sunday. That's because normally the live is Thursday night, but last night I was in hospital, making sure Mum's okay. I will say this, if you're going to get ill in the UK, Cornish hospitals are a good place to get ill. They do take care of you. They have really, really kind of helpful staff. I probably shouldn't admit this, but, you know, she got shortcake and coffee provided because they were looking at her going, have you eaten enough? Have you drunk enough? And sort of really looked after her. The pharmacy was great to go and talk to. Really can't critique the medical staff and the medical support at all down here. Wish there was slightly more of it, but frankly, what there is very good, so quality is always very useful in a medical service. Staff excellent. You know, it'd be nice if Dr. Dan was down here. Would have made some of the things a little bit easier, but you know, I'm going to have to persuade him to move. Right. Now, originally, and I do apologise for eating, but as said, no food all day. Originally, we started off looking in the Kuvrak area, because that's where we have most connections to. And from there, we've sort of moved back towards Truro because of communications links, medical facilities, all those things. Lieutenant, that was your 20th super stream? Just finished your video on Tsushima. What if the 1st Pacific Squadron was swapped the 2nd before the war? Doesn't really help them. I mean, they lose different ships, and they have more worked up ships to send out, and possibly they have a better commander admiral. But I don't think he's logistically as good as Rosansky was. And I don't think anything really does that job. You're sending those ships so far with so little support into a period when they really can't. If we consider what happens in the Franco-Prussian War over far closer distances, and basically the Prussians destroy the French and defeat the French because the French are operating at the limits of their logistical reach in terms of supporting a major fleet force. Tsushima is just a massive problem. Ah. I'd love to see Dan move. I think he'd like it down in Cornwall. Honestly, I have to say, there is potential for more of the ship-shape crew to end up down here. I'm not sure if it will happen. I'm certainly campaigning for it. Because I think they'd like it down here. No, what if a question? If the Pig War had broken out in the real war in 59, how well could the Royal Navy operate on the other side of the Pacific with the nation they were fighting in the way? Better than the Americans could operate on the other side of the Atlantic. And please note, let me explain that, because the British have ships which are out there which have the purpose of doing that. And the British have forces which have practiced doing that. And again, the British don't need that larger force to be on the Pacific coast to win the Pacific coast. There isn't. You have to remember, this is the longest time before the Panama Canal. The US Navy is not combined. Most of the US Navy's infrastructure industry is on the Atlantic coast, and a bit is on the Gulf Coast. Not much is on the West Coast. So you don't need to deploy that many ships to the West Coast to take advantage of Eskimo and work your way down. The British have far more ships to spare than the Americans do for that sort of scenario, and that's the big problem for the Americans in that scenario. In the Pig War, it will always be a very interesting scenario because the American ground forces theoretically are far better prepared than they are in 1812, but they have lots of issues. Remember, this is the same nation which erupts very shortly into the American Civil War. So whilst a Pig War against the British possibly will hold things off for a while, it might not. It might not. It might lead to other issues emerging. And the British, as much as they do not favour certain attributes of the South, if you're already at war with the North, the British are sufficiently agnostic on certain topics. Not so much agnostic, but realistic in certain topics to work with you while you're useful to them. Remember, my enemy's enemy is my friend is a phraseology which Britain has been using for a long, long time. They didn't like the Soviet Union, they still worked with them. They didn't like all sorts of powers, they still worked with them. Basically, the only ally they liked in the Napoleonic Wars, that they actually liked, were the Portuguese. The Prussians were annoying and obsessive. The various other powers were all problematic to manage and required masses of diligent effort. The only ones they really liked and got on with were the Portuguese. In fact, if you go back through most of British history, the only ally we like and get on with is the Portuguese. So Portugal, we love you. Everyone else, we tolerate you. So yeah, it's varying levels, but yes. Now, the thing is, let's get into this. Let's actually start this properly, because we've had... Let's start this, shall we? Operation Berlin, tour de force or tour de farce. The thing is, Operation Berlin is successful. I'm not going to claim it isn't. But the thing is, it has issues. It has issues with what is going on and what is going to happen. it has issues with the fact of what it's supposed to achieve versus what it actually does achieve. Because, to an extent, it actually makes it more likely what will later happen to Bismarck. Because the Germans come out in a strong enough force, but not a strong enough force to be able to overwhelm a convoy, which is an important convoy, which is escorted. So they hoover up individual ships, but they have to leave behind the big prizes. The big prizes they really want. Whereas if they'd waited till Bismarck was ready, then there's a very different scenario. The Germans are very good at throwing away their capabilities, and they aren't very good at marshalling their strength in naval operation terms. They want to go do something. They're so obsessed with doing something, they don't think whether this is the right time or whether they should wait a bit longer. So, let's start off with the Shameless book plug. Yay! Now, the one thing I am looking forward to when I get back properly home. I've got a whole load of copies, apparently, of this, the new version, sitting at my neighbour's. And I'm going to keep a copy for myself. Okay, I am going to keep a copy for myself this time, because I actually gave away all my copies last time, and then remembered to keep a copy for myself. And luckily I got a book review copy sent to me. But I gave away what I think was supposed to be my own copy to my mum, which it seems fine. And this time, well, I have some people from last time who I've noted down who I didn't manage to send copies to because I ran out of them. They're going to get their copies. And I think that's going to leave roughly 2 for prizes. It might go down to 1 being a prize for something, but I'm still working out what the Christmas competition will be. But I am thinking about running a competition and sending a prize to a winner. But I haven't yet worked out, so suggestions for what kind of competition might be nice to run, please tell me. Because the other option is I just randomly pick someone and send it to them. And I think it's nicer to run it as a prize, because it means it's not just going to be people who I automatically know watch because they necessarily chat, but some people who might be long-term viewers but don't actually like to get involved in the chat because they might not be a chatter, or they might never manage to watch a live. In which case, it's nice for them to be able to get involved and possibly win a prize as well. So, yeah, there's some people come up with an essay idea. Don't take this the wrong way, but the essay idea means just I have to do some marking in my mind. I can understand the essay prize idea, but yeah, no. I might go that way. And is there going to be a book signing? There is going to be definitely a book signing and presentation, at least one next year. Because next year I'm going to be starting off the Lawton series of naval history conferences. So yeah, those will be fun. So, let's start off with something completely different, but it's something to bear in mind when talking about Operation Berlin. And I am going to expand this fully for you all, so you hopefully can all read it. And I'm going to read it out to you. This is from an article by Matthew Seligman. It's Naval History by Conspiracy Theory, the British Admiralty before the First World War, Methodology of Revisionism. Now, please note, Professor Seligman was one of my examiners during my PhD thesis. I had Professor Harry Bennett from Plymouth University, and I had Professor Matthew Seligman. It's always lovely when you get two absolute experts in their field to lead the examination of your PhD thesis. It's also slightly scary. But this is what he wrote in 2015, and I was the other day thinking about this topic, especially in relation to Operation Berlin. And I was trying to remember where I'd read a very good article about it. And I remembered that the article I'd read the best description about revisionism you get in history, especially naval history, was his 2015 piece, which I have to admit I read as preparation before my Viva. So, the revisionist arguments are notable, not just for their originality, but also for their total reversal of previously received wisdom. They are not mere refinements of existing positions, they actually turn earlier assumptions on their heads. In the brave new interpretive world, they have fashioned almost everything that we thought we knew about the British Admiralty turns out to be wrong. The extent of this world turned upside down begs the question, why is it that scholars have not previously noticed the many remarkable innovative dimensions of British naval thinking in this period? A series of developments which, in the revisionist perspective, amounted to a revolution in naval strategic thought. There are many possible answers to this, the most obvious one being that not one of their supposed naval revolutions actually took place. Fisher proved unable to replace battleships with battlecruisers. The RN never came to rely on a mutual sea denial for home defence. No battleships were dropped in 1914 in favour of submarines. No British admiral adopted medium-range tactics at any major surface action of the First World War, and when war came, a slow rather than rapid economic warfare strategy was implemented. Thus, judged by results, each and every one of these revolutions proved a phantom. If they existed, they are just easily missed. This goes on about a page later. This account of how generations of historians were misled contains elements that are plausible. Anyone who has ever worked in Admiralty papers knows that they are frustratingly incomplete. Indeed, the surviving dockets in the National Archives represent a mere 2% of those that were originally registered. A staggering 98% have been lost, mislaid, inadvertently destroyed, or worse, deliberately weeded out as part of the department's notoriously overzealous archival management process. Given the enormous scale of the routine destruction, the absence of particular papers cannot automatically be equated with a cover-up. Equally, however, the idea that some official papers might have been surreptitiously purged for being embarrassing does not require too great a stretch of the imagination to conceive, and, no doubt, there were documents that met a premature end for this all too human but deeply unsatisfactory reason. Thus, it can be conceded that some gaps in record could have been caused in this way. However, acknowledging such a possibility, in a general sense, is quite different from proving that it definitely occurred in relation to a specific set of documents. In this context, it must clearly be stated that just because a particular topic does not appear to be the subject of any of the surviving Admiralty papers, this is not in itself evidence that any records have been destroyed. After all, there would also be no surviving documentation on a given matter if it had never formed the subject of discussion in the first place. Consequently, the mere fact of being unable to find records on a specific issue does not remove the obligation from the historian who asserts the documentation missing, especially if that claim, that is missing, incorporates the idea of a cover-up, of proving that such a documentation definitely once existed. Fortunately, in the case of the Admiralty, ascertaining what was once there is not normally a complex task. Individual Admiralty dockets on specific issues frequently make reference to other papers relating to the same topic, normally citing the branch serial number of the Admiralty Record Office title of papers in question. On this information, we can hunt for decided papers, sure of knowledge that they once existed, even if such a search ultimately proves that they no longer exist today. Equally, much can be revealed about the former contents of the Admiralty Record Office from a close inspection of that body's run of indexes, digests, and compendia. Contained within these big leather-bound tomes are details of the names, dates, and contents, arranged alphabetically and also by subject of all the files that were ever registered with the Admiralty Record Office, including those subsequently weeded. It is thus possible, through their careful use of these volumes, to ascertain what once existed and what, if now missing, has been destroyed. I would add I have my own example of this in my own research. It's called the Tsingtao incident of January 1939, which I've talked about a fair number of times. I can take you to the National Archives in Kew I can get out all the documents about Tsingtao that survive in January 1939. The document which survives most intact is the index, which tells me that there were once many, many more documents to do with the topic. Many, many more that have all gone. Because a lot of the indexes were kept. So, there is a small problem when you start doing revisionism when it comes to the Royal Navy. In that you would have to believe and prove that not only had the documents been ceased to exist, but you would either have to say, well, look, they existed in the index, or in the case of some of these claims about revisionism when it comes to the Royal Navy, they claim the index has been edited. Now, that's not an impossible task, but that's a lot of effort and it's going to involve a lot of people. And what is the rule of thumb if you want to keep something secret? You want to employ the minimum number of people. The minimal number of people. The best way to keep a secret is to make sure all those who know it can't speak. That's a problem. Because in a Navy, in the Royal Navy, you don't just go around, well, let's be honest, the best way to stop them being able to speak is to kill them. You're not just going around doing that. That's not going to randomly start happening to various naval officers. You're not going to take out admirals and whole staffs to hide documents. Now, what is Seligman talking about in relation to this? Well, it's, of course, the whole discussion about what was Britain's planned defence during World War I. That's what comes up quite a lot of revisionism. But there's also revisionism when it comes to World War II and certain events. One of the great things is that, and this comes up with Operation Berlin, is to what extent were the British manipulating Operation Berlin? Now, why am I bringing this up? Because not a long time ago, I was sent a personal paper written by someone which I don't think has actually managed to make it through editing and review in a journal and hasn't been published. So I'm not going to name names, and I am going to paraphrase quite dramatically what my response was to the paper. Because basically the argument was based on the idea of, well, if Britain has Enigma and all sorts of things that they are breaking and information they get receiving, they're manipulating the operations. They stick the Rawalpindi there to slow them down. They arranged the Clyde and all those other things to let them to delay them coming out. And then they, when they're going around, they suddenly find battleships with all the major convoys. This is the idea. It was all a cunning ruse to let them out, but not actually let them do anything. And it was delayed by these sacrifices and by Clyde torpedoing, but only damaging Gneisenau. Okay, well, we're going to get into the proper history, but I wanted to deal with this one, and it's not the only revisionist thing I've seen around Operation Berlin recently. Let's start off with this. 1. If the Royal Navy knew where the Germans were going to be, and knew where Shameless and Naval were going to be, they wouldn't have stuck Rawalpindi there. They'd have stuck Nelson and Rodney there. Quite simple. If they knew that they were going to come through and get into close range of something, they'd like them to get in close range of Nelson and Rodney. Because that would have been very short, very sharp, very painful work. 2 Scharnhorst class on the bottom. Thank you very much. That works better for the Royal Navy than biding time. Because sinking them takes them off the table. And you have to remember the sheer amount of forces that get tied down for the Royal Navy watching for something to come out from Germany, because they have to have something constantly ready to intercept it if it comes out from Germany. So for every one vessel the Germans have ready to come out. The British need pretty much 3 on alert. Now, they do fudge it at bits and points during World War II, but it's a large commitment to cover that. It'd be far nicer if you didn't have to. So the British are not going to do something like throw away Rawalpindi. Second one is, HMS Clyde was trying to sink the Naval. The fact she didn't was something that was personally annoying to Clyde's commander and the rest of her crew. They really wanted, they are a Thames class, we'll get into that one in a second. They were trying to sink it, and if they had, they'd have been very happy. Also, if they had, those people who tend to claim that the Royal Navy Submarine Service either didn't exist, or was completely ineffectual and did nothing during World War II, would probably never show up. The fact is, if you want to look for a most successful pound-for-pound killing submarines in World War II, sadly enough, the triumph goes to the U-class submarines of 10th Flotilla in Malta, followed by a lot of American submarine flotillas, followed by the Germans and various flotillas. But pound for pound, the U-class do better than anyone. They're quite freaky. Mostly because they're the Allied ships who have the most targets in the most limited area, and those targets can't really do more other than head in a straight line, north-south or south-to-north. That means they're pretty easy prey for them to go after. And it gives them an, they've got a right effective operating area right there. And finally, the British have been sailing battleships with critical convoys from the beginning of World War II. That's pretty much de facto what they had their older battleships for. In this sort of Operation Berlin, we often talk about Ramillies, but also there's a convoy which involves Malaya. And then there are convoys which have King George V and Rodney. At one point, Nelson, Hood and Queen Elizabeth are out hunting them, and let's be honest, that's something to imagine. A fight where Nelson, Hood and Queen Elizabeth track down Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Can we all be certain that that would not be an interesting fight to see? HMS Nelson, HMS Hood, and HMS Queen Elizabeth. Those are not 3 ships which, if I'm in a Scharnhorst, I really want to tangle with. One's a modernized Queen Elizabeth, one is Hood, which definitely exceeds me in firepower, and one is Nelson, who is in a running race with her sister Rodney as to who's actually going to get one of us. I'm going to say I'm referring you to your question. I've recently been watching a lot of your key ship series. Will you ever cover the non-IJN access carrier-craft that never built like the Grau Zeppelin and Aquila? I think I've done the Grau Zeppelin. I haven't done the Aquila. I'm going to do. I don't think I've done the IJN carrier, which wasn't built yet. Their planned one. The value of a fleet being, yeah, that's pretty much the British problem. So, yeah, when I see revisionism being broken out for Operation Berlin, I'm looking at it going, excuse me. I would also argue that a lot of the revisionism, especially when you're... Okay, I have to say I am guilty in some extent. Some people often point out to me of revisionism because I seek to highlight the roles of destroyers and smaller ships in battle. But the point I'm often making is that's not so much revisionist as shifting the spotlight. Because it's very easy to focus on what the big ships are doing. But if you do something like the amount of examples, and if you want to have real fun, read some of the general books on World War II which discuss the Battle of Narvik. And they will tell you all about how HMS Warspite and some destroyers go into Narvik. Then read my account of the Battle of Narvik, and you sit there and go, well, hang on, Warspite was providing support, but she's not the centerpiece of this. So why are you focusing in on her? She's important, but it's not... she's sort of... It's one of the few battles where she is really an assist rather than a lead. She's supporting the battle, not leading the battle. That's the destroyer's job. But when you read some of the books about it, you would think it was Warspite leading and doing all the work, and the destroyers were just also rans. So I don't consider that revisionism. I consider that almost correcting, because I'm not diminishing the role of Warspite. Warspite's a great ship which did really good stuff during World War II. I'm just pointing out that in some battles, it wasn't her which was leading the lion's share of the fighting. No, 6831. If you're going to move to Cornwall, will there be any universities that you and your sister are trying to apply for? The university my sister works for already does most of its teaching online. UCM, I think is hers. University College of State Management or something, is she works for online. That's what she works. She was headhunted for, and there are some good unis down here. There's actually one not far from Truro, which is the Penryn campus of Exeter University and Falmouth University. And that's a good campus. It's got some good history departments there. There's some good history departments around Cornwall, around Devon, which I could get to. It depends. Am I looking for a full-time job or a part-time job? I'm quite happy with a part-time role because I'm quite happy to freedom to keep doing YouTube and do all the stuff which I enjoy doing with YouTube and doing all the research and publication. I realise it isn't possibly the most financially sensible because for an academic having a 10-year post and getting a professorship is probably the most secure financially, but I like doing the YouTube stuff. I like working with all of you. Hello, Garius, and yes, I am in the pocket of Big Destroyer. Currently, Big Destroyer has provided my only book in the moment that's currently out. MC Legend 13 UYT. Any scenario where the chance get anywhere close in their odds, so 1600 guns is never a good one for channels. No, and if they find both... See, this is the thing. If the Royal Navy were going to do a trap, the other option the Royal Navy could have done is if they were still going to stick Royal Opindy out there as an option, is they could load it with torpedoes. Because as we've talked about when we talked about the Royal Opindy scenario, if she'd had torpedoes, deck-launched torpedoes to fire, which she could have been fitted with, the ranges she was at, they let her get to before they actually properly engaged her because they were so confused by a armed merchant cruiser engager. She would have wiped them out. If she'd been launching a spread of 8 torpedoes off either side, port and starboard, towards Charnos and Gneisenau, the odds of them getting away would have been 0 and they would have been wiped out. And hello, Garrus, by the way. Hello, Black Mountain Maximus. It's life. So, the Royal Navy, the Royal Navy likes to do ambushes on people. They do not put things in the way of people to be just taken out. It's one of those things, you go, well, perhaps the British thought that that vessel would have sunk them? No, then at no point are they going to think that the Rawalpindi is going to win a fight versus Scharnhorst and Eisenhower. But still, saying this, Operation Berlin is probably the most successful German Atlantic operation of World War II. And why is that? Well, think about it from the perspective of the British, and think about it from the perspective of what I talked about earlier. If you've got Scharnhorst and Gneisenau acting together, what are the British doing? They're grouping their ships together. They've got Nelson, Queen Elizabeth, and Hood together as a group. If you've got two ships out, the British are sending groups of 3. When they send out Bismarck, they're sending out pairs. So if you have 6 ships versus the Germans 2, if they are to deploy, keeping them together as 2, the British can be in 2 places at once with 3 ships. But if the Germans send out 1, the British can be in 3 places at the same time, each with 2 ships. So this is a real thing. And it's another point to think about when we're talking about German operations and when they're doing these things. They are constantly shooting themselves in the foot. The amount of times I have to explain to people that no, the Germans were not strategic geniuses. They were good, but they often made some quite catastrophic errors. And this all often gets blamed on Hitler, but frankly, this cannot be blamed entirely on Hitler by any stretch of the imagination. Because especially when it comes to naval forces, he kind of doesn't know what he's talking about and tends to go with the options presented and most strongly argued for. And the fact is, if they'd kept Scharnhorst and Gneisenau back and waited for Bismarck, think what the effect that would force on the British again. Think this in a nice way. If you've got Scharnhorst, Gneisenau and Bismarck, now can an R-class possibly defend a convoy against both of them? An R-class can stop Scharnhorst and Gneisenau getting to a convoy. She's got to deal with Bismarck as well, then she's in serious trouble. Think about it from the British perspective. What are you doing? You're forming hunting groups. Those R-classes, can they be left with convoys? Do you have to stop your convoys and have to form hunting groups of 2 of Nelson, Rodney and a couple of R-class? Maybe put together 2 or 3 Queen Elizabeth class together, and King George V, Prince of Wales, Hood and Renown. If the Germans come with 3 ships. So coming out of 2 ships causes a real narrowing of British options. Coming out of 1 ship is basically the dream for the British. Your 1 ship might be might be powerful, but it's still 1 ship, which according to the British metric, to guarantee victory, they reckon they require 2. Yes, of course, Denmark Strait shows the issue with that, because there's still golden BBs, and there's the fact that some of their ships have not been modernised when they needed to be. But let's be honest, on paper, Bismarck should not have walked away from that like she did. She did walk away damaged. Prince of Wales had done that. But Prince of Wales had only managed to silver BB her. She hadn't golden BB'd her. And there's a difference. With the Atlantic operation of Operation Berlin, with what the Germans achieved, they're doing all this sailing around the North Atlantic, going out into the South Atlantic. They're doing all these operations. They're affecting major convoy routes. But what do you require to defend the convoy? 1. You require 1 battleship to deter 2 from attacking a convoy. You require 3 to attack a convoy, to attack 2 to guarantee a good chance of victory. If the Germans have 3, then you have to decide whether you're going to put 2 ships with every convoy, or if you're going to put groups of 4 out there hunting. You see the problem the Germans would have created for the British if they'd just been a little bit more patient. And yes, repulse is also another option. Where would I put repulse though? Because would I put Renown's been modernised. Hood's got 8 15-inch guns, and is a slightly newer design than repulse. If I add in King George V and Prince of Wales, that's a fairly good hunting group of 4. If I can put 3 Queen Elizabeth class together, perhaps add repulse to that to give them a group, and that's your 4, and then 2 R's and Nelson and Rodney, and that's a group of 4. But let's be honest, of those groups, there's only one I'd actually like to catch the Germans. I prefer it be the King George V, Prince of Wales, Hood and Renown. I think we all would. Your preferable scenario in that scenario would be a King George V, would be probably Prince of Wales Renown attack one of the Scharnhorst, while King George V focuses on Bismarck, and Hood focuses on the second Scharnhorst, and then you work your way up. But yeah, and all those groups are going to need carriers. So that's the other problem. So for the British, when the Germans come out in 1s and 2s, 1s make their lives easier. 2s are more difficult. 3s would have been a nightmare. If the Germans had ever managed to do what the Italians did, and the Italians were capable of sending out 4s and 5s, even 6. If the Germans had saved up to send out Tirpitz, Bismarck, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau together, think about what the Royal Navy would have to do. Think about how the Royal Navy would have to organise itself. And think about what kind of battle could take place. This is a feat. It is a successful operation. They get out, they sink a lot of ships. They cause a lot of trouble for the Royal Navy. It's a feat because they get out and they're basically stomping around in the backyard of Great Britain. But, how do I put this politely? They also are hoovering up the scraps. And mostly the prizes which they really want, they're directing submarines into. They're not attacking themselves. Which again shows their utility, but the reason they're doing that is because those prizes are secured. If Germany somehow continued the construction of Graf Zeppelin, they had her constructed, they needed to finish her. And she's finished and sent out with Bismarck and both Scharnhorst and Mediterranean, and also in Operation Berlin. I'm going to guess, what effect will the additional carrier having all 4 capital ships have? That's... Well, again, think about it. What the Royal Navy is going to want. If the Germans have 1 carrier in a group, the Royal Navy are going to want to have 2 carriers in a group. If the Germans have 4 capital ships, the Royal Navy are going to have 5 in the group. So think about that. Think about how limited that becomes of forces if you've got forces in the Mediterranean. Basically, the British end up forming a fast group and a slow group. A slow group probably centered on... with Furious as one of their carriers. It's just... Excuse me a second. It's just not a good scenario for them. It just isn't. Anytime the Germans come out more strongly, the British have to overmatch it. Because that's how the Royal Navy works. The Royal Navy doesn't fight fair. The Royal Navy doesn't go, you've brought out 1 ship, we will send in single ships to fight you because that is fair and honourable to do it as a one-on-one duel. No, they want superiority of numbers. If you have a single carrier, they have 2. If you have 4 battleships, they'll want 5. The more you you raise the force, the more you put limitations on them. That's what the Germans don't really seem to realise. They think their big impact on the Royal Navy is sinking ships. No. Honestly, the best way you can disrupt convoys is to stop them running. And the way you stop them running is you denude them of escorts. The thing is, the Operation Berlin doesn't stop them running because the Royal Navy is able to supply enough of the critical convoys with a single battleship as escort, because that's enough to deal with Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Or rather, to damage them enough and hold them long enough for one of the rapid reaction forces to arrive. That's the plan. Rapid reaction forces being roughly 3 capital ships and a carrier. Because did I mention that Nelson, Queen Elizabeth, and Hood had Ark Royal with them? So that's going to have an impact on your life expectancy. And that's what we're trying to get at here. So the concept of the operation. Well, I wanted to put up some very nice merchant vessels of 1930 sort of style. So we've got Manchester Port and Manchester Progress. Port is this one, which is 7,071 gross registered tons. And that's Manchester Progress, which is 5,620 gross registered tons. They are both built in 1930s and served into the 1960s. So, does anyone know where I put my Ambro? Found it. The German targets were these merchant ships, because, believe it or not, the most efficient killing system for merchant ships was not a submarine. It's not even a battleship's main armament, it's their secondaries. Pound for pound, the quickest and cheapest way to kill a merchant ship is to use the secondaries on a capital ship. And if you can go and grab those merchants, and you can go and disrupt their movement of their goods, you can do a massive amount of damage. There's also the fact that, for the Royal Navy, think about it this way. Your only way to defend a convoy against the effect of these large surface vessels is to put a capital ship with them. Okay? You do that, you have a capital ship trailing across the Atlantic into the face of submarine wolf packs, limited in speed and area of maneuver to the operations of a convoy. In other words, it's like you have one of those large... What are they, the dogs which are built to... are they Mamelukes? The dogs which are bred to defend against coyotes and other things and protect cattle and other wildlife. Anyway, I've forgotten their name. But it's like you've got one of those, and instead of letting it roam your property, you have chained and collared it. You've collared and chained it to its kennel. So now it can't move around freely. The other thing you've done is now those submarines, which are those poachers, sheepdogs. No, it's not. They're not sheepdogs. Collie dogs aren't used to it. Great Pyrenees, I think. Possibly a Marimar sheepdog. Not sure. Livestock gardening. I think it's a Great Pyrenees. Pyrenees mountain dog. Yeah. Remember correctly, I was reading watching a video and reading an article about how one of those livestock guardian dogs Might be a Marimena sheepdog. Um, Basically took out an entire bunch of coyotes because they decided to have the temerity to well, his lady wife had just had some puppies, and they were going after the place where his puppies were and his wife was. So he decided that 14 coyotes versus him were they were all going down hard. And this sort of brings me to a scenario, because theoretically, if you have a large enough threat, let's say it's Bismarck and Tirpitz are out, i.e. they don't carry out the operation with Bismarck when they do, they wait till Tirpitz are ready. You know, would you, if you had a Warspite, unfortunately, is the other side of the the other side of the Mediterranean at this point, I think, when they're doing that, but if she'd have been available, yes, Warspite could have ended up defending a convoy. That's not a good scenario, because the odds are that convoy would end up being attacked by both Bismarck and Tirpitz, and Lord knows what would happen. MC Edition 13 UT, a Nightmare Son of Yaren is both Grau Zeppelin and Kieler in the Mediterranean are completed. If both Germany and Italy have a carrier that would stretch Iron carrier deployment very badly. It would to an extent, but I have a feeling that both would be the target of many, many night attacks. So, the German concept of operations is very much to get out and hopefully hit a large convoy. Why? Well, if you hit ships which aren't in a convoy, you prove the British right with the idea of convoys. If you manage to hit a convoy, a large convoy, and hoover it all up, what do you do for the British? Well, either the British are forced to designate to give far more resources to convoy escort duty. Far more resources to convoy escort duty. Fluffball? Or, alternatively, the British might think their only security for their convoys lies in for their merchant ships lies in abandoning convoys. Consider that for a scenario. If Scharnhorst and Gneisenau had got into a convoy of 80 or 100 merchant ships, had sunk them all, and their escort, and maybe done it with another convoy and another route. Let's be honest, Churchill and a few others are random enough personalities. They might have gone with the idea of breaking up convoys. The only way to protect ships from being hoovered up like they're in a convoy is to have them sailing independently. In which case, those same merchant ships would have been victims of the submarine wolf packs. The other requirement is that they end up going, well, actually, no, what you have to do is you have to have a battleship sailing with every single convoy. So you either have to wait for convoys up, soar convoys up so they're massive, so you have few enough convoys across you can have them having a battleship each one, or you have to use every single battleship you have to escort convoys. Robert Donut, Warspite, a plot armor goes to Mythic and no end. If Warspite ended up in a convoy battle with Bismarck and Tirpitz somehow, and won, or in any way survived, and even one of them just they managed to damage the other two enough, Warspite A would not have been able to be scrapped, and B, mythical status, she would be god status. Warspite would have shrines dedicated to her in most countries in the world with that level of legend. I was reading a thing the other day about someone sort of pointing out that, you know, there were American ships which apparently have more battle honours than Warspite, and I was going, well, yes and no, but how many ships do you know did donuts in front of the entire High Seas fleet? If you haven't done that, there is a reason for your legendary status. You know, if you've done donuts in front of the entire High Seas fleet while they're trying to kill you, you've kind of developed a level of plot armor, which not many other ships have in the world, because I can't off the top of my head think of another ship which has done donuts in front of their enemy fleet. Really, it's the whole scenario becomes a big problem for the British. If the German surface ships manage to do the damage which they can do, they're in trouble. But even the potential damage they can do is going to affect the British merchant ships and the supply and movement of goods. And we can get into this. We can get into the effect this will have. Because the primary problem for Britain it presents is the HX convoys. Now, before people usually start, when I start talking about convoys, go, oh, they had such a hard time. They did, but HX convoys are an incredibly important convoy series for Britain. They originate in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then they sail to Liverpool and other ports in Britain. They totaled 377 convoys run during World War II. A cumulative of 17,744 ship journeys accomplished. These are just talking about the eastbound convoys from Halifax to Liverpool. Of these 377 convoys, 38 convoys were actually attacked. Think about that. 377 convoys attacked, only the convoys run, only 38 attacked. That's pretty good. And a total of 206 ships lost. So out of 17,744 ship journeys, 206 were lost. Of those, 110 were lost in the convoy. 60 ships were lost while straggling. That means they'd lost the convoy. They'd fallen off the rear of the convoy and were lost. And 36 ships lost while detached or after dispersal, with losses from marine accident and other causes. Capsule, how close does Enterprise's slalom run at sea as a cruise run come? That's pretty darn close. But you think about that, that's literally the other scenario you can think of to compare to the donuts. And as I've often said, if Enterprise and Warspite ever teamed up in a battle action, Lord help anyone who fought them. Because those two ships just would not understand the concept of how mortality applies to them. Vision, reading about Jutland in the HMS New Zealand battlecruiser book was amusing. It was. Some ships really do have plot armor. New Zealand is one of them, Warspite is one of them, Enterprise is one of them. There are a couple of others which are fairly close there. I would personally say HMS Eskimo could be argued to have plot armor, considering the amount of time she loses her bow, but it still carries on. I would argue that Asante definitely has plot armor. So the thing is, the HX convoys matter. The HX convoys are pretty darn crucial. The HX convoys are also incredibly successful. Let's think about that. If you're talking about a convoy a system where 10% of your convoys on this, you have only a 1 in 10 chance, well, slightly above a 1 in 10 chance of actually being attacked on this convoy route. Think about how many times convoys ran this route and didn't get attacked. If 38 get attacked, that means 300. Not 32, 339 convoys got through without any incident whatsoever. 339. Maximus, alt history. Royal Navy gets high pressure boilers. Queen Elizabeth get bow extensions that hit 28 plus knots. And Warspite ends up teaming up with Enterprise in the Pacific. At some point, Yamato and Musashi end up running into Warspite and Enterprise, and we all know how that ends. Everyone going, but they had 18-inch guns! Yes, but it was Warspite and Enterprise. But they had 18-inch guns. They rammed them. But they had 18-inch guns. It was Warspite and Enterprise. Not honest. Would things have been worse for the Allies if Italy stopped short of war in 1940? France has still gone down. Our end still has to watch the Italian fleet without being able to act against them. Actually, no. Because that would mean the British could run stuff through the Mediterranean. And if you can run convoys through the Mediterranean for even another few months, you shorten down journey times colossally. And you allow the movement of personnel and goods backwards and forwards, and key supplies. One of the key imports would have been a large amount of rubber, etc., from Malaya and the Far East, and various other minerals and materials. So, yes, they'd have had to watch the Italians, but they'd have also had more time to build up supplies and move goods around, so that would have helped them. My God, but I'm a bigger. Yeah, that's pretty much what you get if people go. It shouldn't have worked. Yeah, but it was Warspite and Enterprise. They were being attacked by multiple sides by aircraft, and then they had Warspite coming up at them. And then Enterprise decided to round them as well, just because she could, and because it shouldn't only be Formidable, which has the fun of actually fighting in battles. Now, prior attempts to come out had been delayed. Okay, there's a reason why they're going out in January 1941. There's the fact that in June 1940, well, HMS Clyde managed to torpedo Gneisenau, which delays them by roughly 6 months from going out. Prior to that, their bumping into Rawalpindi in November 1939 had been a bit of an issue. Delayed them, they'd gone back, and then of course you have Norway and other events. Now, these events, when they happen, are very helpful for the British. They buy time, but they also show the confluence of war. They show you can have these things occur, and it's a case of, ouch. It's like Rawalpindi. She was in the, you could argue, the right place for the Royal Navy, in that she was there to spot the Germans, at the wrong time. Or rather, was in the right time, wrong place. Because she should have been able to see them, but also try and get away from them. She certainly couldn't fight them. With HMS Clyde, you'd rather like to have her have got more than one torpedo hit. If she could have got multiple torpedo hits, then Gneisenau might have gone, in which case Operation Berlin would have been very different again. Because any scenario where it's just Scharnhorst coming out instead of Scharnhorst and Gneisenau makes the Royal Navy's scenario even easier to deal with, because what they've got to deploy is basically the same kind of force structure as they have to focus on Bismarck. But let's be honest, Scharnhorst doesn't have 15-inch guns. From memory, and I'm going to double check this because I have been informed this by Melanie, 1640, who was talking to me last night. I was going, and my brain was just about sort of starting to work after coming back from hospital with Mum. And it's got, the Scharnhorst has a 350mm belt. The Bismarck has a 320mm belt. So the Scharnhorst actually had a thicker belt armour than the Bismarck did. It also had roughly the same bulkheads, I think. But thinner deck armour. That's what Bismarck has provided us of. She's got thicker deck armor, and I think about the same turret armor. So the thing is, if Scharnhorst is out on her own, that's not a good scenario for her. There's very little that she can do on her own. In terms of, she can hoover up merchant ships, but she certainly can't take on a convoy, which has an R class with it. And the hunting groups, they'll be deployed in pairs, with a carrier on every other hunting group again. So really, this attempt, when it does go, A, has been something a long time in the making, but B, is probably the most viable attempt they make. As said, again, 2 capital ships. Yes, they're 11-inch gun capital ships, but they're still capital ships. Yes, they're fast battleships, but that's viable. Veteran, how were these attacks, those attacks on Halifax convoys disrupted? Thinking most attacks are 90, 41, 42, so chance of attack higher in some years? It is certainly higher in some years, but I think you're saying distributed, not disrupted. Higher attacks were higher in some years, but also there's the fact that the HX convoys, how do I put this, seem to sail under an artificially lucky star on occasions. Some of those are critical convoys, and they make sure they get through. Cynical part of me is thinking that. A very cynical part of me. Oh, I think Mighty Fluff just woofed. Robert, why not use stubs such as T-class to escort to convoys? The convoys are slow enough. When attacked, they could dive and attack. No stubs on the radar. You can do that to an extent, but also you have to think of what's the subs also doing. The subs are doing other missions. The T-class are being used for attacking the enemy. But fundamentally, you also have the problem of, if that's what your submarines are doing, the moment they dive, you have to suddenly be very careful about the German submarines. Whereas, about what submarine you're engaging. Whereas if you keep the British submarines out of the convoys, then any submarine you see, and they're very careful, the operating areas, to keep British submarines away from convoys. That basically means that any submarine that's detected, any submarine they see, is something they go and take out. So you'll make, if you the operating submarines with the convoys just makes your anti-submarine warfare scenario a lot more difficult. Whereas if you want something to go and torpedo a capital ship, have destroyers with you, and that's what, to an extent, what they do. Seeing Richards, wouldn't the Bismarck and Twins just get pinned in Brest? If they survive to get the Brest, yes. But the thing is, then they just would probably repeat the Channel Dash. But still, the problem for the British, if the Scharnhorst and Eisenhower get pinned in Brest. But the thing is, if you have Bismarck as well as Scharnhorst and Eisenhower, there's more of a chance of them causing even more trouble. It's the compound issue. Think about it again from the scenario of, how do you defend a convoy if the Germans have all 4 out together? If they have Bismarck, Tirpitz, Scharnhorst and Eisenhower out together. Let's leave aside Grass Zeppelin for a second. Let's, say just have 4 capital ships out. What's enough force to defend that convoy? I think someone wants to go out. What do you think? Do you think a brother wants to go out? I'm not on duty for him. I'm on duty for you. You're just going back to sleep. Okay. Sorry. If you're wondering who I'm talking to as you just joined us, he's wagging his tail and saying hello to you all. Okay? Yes. Good boy. You gonna come home and say hello close to them, or are you just gonna lie indolently on with, be indolent with, enjoyment over there? Oh, you're getting closer. Okay. All right. You good boy. Let's zoom in a bit. Oh, actually, no. Let's leave it like this, and you can see what he's up to. Well, yes. May need a PT. So, the prior attempts... Yeah, bumping into Rawalpindi. I did put bumping into Rawalpindi for a reason there, because they weren't expecting Rawalpindi to be there. It was kind of like they're in a sort of... not necessarily the best visual scenario for a period at that time, and they end up going in and going, "Hey, there's Rawalpindi," and they don't even realise Rawalpindi is Rawalpindi. They think it's just a merchant ship, and it's only when they get close they realise it's a merchant cruiser. And as said, it's a shame it didn't have torpedoes, because it got so close, frankly, it could have taken them both out. PT, yeah, poodle treat. Poodle treat. Hello, yes. You've got this chat far too well trained, do you realise? The fact you're salivating over me is worrying. They are not very big things. And you've got seeds in your hair. I brushed you earlier. Sorry. If I don't get these out, they can go in his ears, and that causes all sorts of trouble. Oh, you've picked up seeds. Good boy. Well, why is this one usually on the bed and the other one somewhere else? Honestly, because when this current time, especially Mum having been ill, he's sleeping in here, so this is sort of his bedroom as well. And when I'm working, his bedroom, he basically decides that when I'm working, that's his bedroom space. When I'm asleep, if it's cold, he's up there with me. If it's hot, he's on the floor. There is a bed down here underneath the desk for him. So, he has nice time. And the fluffy research assistant, because remember, they both got promoted. This one's senior now, the other one's the fluffy research assistant. He went from trainee to assistant. Good. The assistant fluffy research assistant is, how do I put this politely? He is next door. And complaining because... Well, you two had the choice. You could pick whichever room you wanted to go into, and you picked this one with me. I think you used your experience and worked out, yes, Papa is more likely to have treats. Why indoors? Because the place we're staying doesn't have a garden. And also, our dogs do sleep indoors. Mostly because in the UK there are all sorts of dog napping issues. People keep trying to nick them. RN had a sub-watch on the French Atlantic ports, though it failed to stop the Chandash. Would more subs conglomerate at ports if both ships are out? Do they have enough escorts to see them in? That is a good question. They still did see them in, but if you have... the thing is, the Germans only have so many escorts, so it doesn't matter how many ships you have going in and going out, they can only get those escorts together. And actually, it's almost easier if it's a one-off option, because then you can just surge them. And one of the things we'll be talking about in this Operation Berlin is actually it's delayed because of the availability of German torpedo boats. Yes. Hello. I'm not sure why, but OBS just disconnected for some reason. So to answer the question again, any PGR, any updates on your book about Black Swan's faster sloops? Does it have information for Starling and Johnny Walker's stop? Jesus. Yes, it will do, but that's book 3 or 4 in the ship series, the Kindle series, so that's behind the flower class and new class. So once I've got them done, then I'll start working on getting that out. Did the RN ever mine the harbour abreast using ships or subs? Yes, they tried both. Crashed? For some reason, OBS disconnected. I still don't know why. Something happened to the Wi-Fi satellite, I presume. Poodle vanished. Yes, Poodle has vanished to get... If you don't know how... Poodle has a feeding station behind me. That is what Poodle is currently at. So, British strategy for Operation Murder could involve a decoy convoy, seemingly vulnerable but armed and guarded by hidden submarines, ships and aircraft to spies and overpowered German raiders. For that, you'd have to guarantee the German raiders would actually go for the decoy convoy. You're going to put so much effort into producing the decoy convoy, and where are the resources going to come from? Where are all those things going to come from? That's going to have to come from other convoys. For that, you're also, to prepare that, you're going to have to know that the Germans are coming, and you're going to have to know when they're coming perfectly so you can time so that convoy slots out and appears out in a normal flow of things so the Germans know it's coming. There were ideas like that, but they never went with it because it just turns into too much resources for too little potential gain. Yeah, look. You okay now? You had food. That's good. That's the back out, and then you can watch the Poodle. You like being watched, don't you? You're slightly fluffy and fluffy nuts. Anyway, so the breakout. One of the interesting things for the Germans when they are trying to get out for Operation Berlin, when they are trying to actually get out to sea, is that when they sail from Kiel, they're not going to use the canal. They have to go out through the straits. And whilst they're sailing through German-controlled Denmark, they were going to try and keep to the centre of the straits and try and get out as quickly as they can, so they attract as less attention as possible. But there's thick ice. And this means that they have to sail quite exposed to agents on the shore, because they have to stay actually closer to the shore on one side. You okay? Furball? We have talked about you when eating your fur. Yes, we have. I know you blame your brother, but it's not just your brother's fur you end up eating. Anyway, leaving that to one side, their other issue was that when they reached Denmark, Skagen to be precise, on the 23rd of January, the flotilla of torpedo boats which were supposed to escort them through the minefields between Denmark and Norway weren't there. In fact, they didn't really arrive till the 25th of January. So they lose very nearly 40 hours thanks to the late arrival of their own torpedo boats. That made Lutyens happy. Now, the Germans were doing their own traffic analysis. We often talk about radio traffic analysis as being something the British are doing to the Germans. They are. The British, whilst Ultra is great, it allows you to occasionally read what the Germans are saying. Traffic analysis was key, working out what was the level of signals and communications going on. And German traffic analysis of British radio signals concluded that, well, it was concluding the British might think there was something in the offing, and the British were certain, because of the traffic analysis, not really ultra, that the Germans were about to send some warships to sea. In fact, specifically at this period, Britain's not really able to break the Kriegsmarine codes officially. And it's unlikely they could unofficially, but there is some interesting debate in some of this stuff which is recently been published about Bletchley Clarke. Tovey, who's the Commander-in-Chief Home Fleet at the time, having heard that there was another raid likely on the 20th of January, put 2 heavy cruisers to reinforce the patrols between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, and the British Naval Attaché in Sweden got the report from agents in Denmark that Shameless and Gneisenau have been sighted passing through the Great Belt, or as the Danish know it, the Strobot. That intelligence is passed to Tovey immediately, and he gets it on the 25th of January. I know, you want patting. You always want patting. You're a good fluff. But sometimes Papa has to do other things rather than just pat you the whole time. Because believe it or not, as much as these very nice people do turn up to watch you be adorable, they also turn up to hear a bit of naval history. Just a bit of naval history. It's more you being adorable. Okay? I know you are sure of that. Now, we'll get on to the Beardists, but the Beardienst is the German intelligence sort of naval intelligence group, and they're aboard all the surface raiders at this point. They've got cells on all of them, trying to understand what the British are doing. They don't really have the British code broken, but they are trying to do signals and traffic analysis, and they are trying to get the information to allow them to break the codes. Right then, do you have any ideas about our current knowledge about how they could have baited them into attacking the convoy? How could they have baited them into attacking the convoy? You'd have had to have signals coming from the convoy which giving away their position and make them an attractive target, whilst also at the same point looking completely natural. So what kind of signals could you send off from the convoy that you'd repeatedly send? If you had someone aboard who was important who died, who was important enough that if they died you need urgent attention, and you had to need to inform people, you couldn't wait till you got to America or to Britain. The ambassador to Britain from the United States? No. He wouldn't be travelling that way. He'd be travelling on an American warship. What's the option? I think it's got to be something. It's got to be something important enough they have to message out. They bad fuel? No, that's not going to wash. Entire convoy being affected by bad fuel. That's unheard of. And also, considering the fuel some of those ships run on, for it to be bad enough fuel for them not to work, it would have to be seriously bad, wouldn't it? It would. So, what's the options? Fake German agent? Fake German agent could be it. Fake German agent could be your methodology. If you could remember, the British have infiltrated quite a lot of the German have basically taken over the entire German network in the UK, spy network. So if they have an agent who's on a convoy, who's transmitting, or someone who's pretending to be an agent on a convoy transmitting, saying where they are, giving the Germans information to guide them in, and perhaps even telling them which ship they're on, so they can which to avoid hitting, that could be their methodology. That could draw them in, but it's a very difficult one to do. Prime Minister Canada wouldn't be enough, really. Does the senior flight research assistant get hairball treats? Basically, he gets them from his. He claims they all come from his brother, who's constantly molting. But there's also the fact that he sometimes trims his own hair by trying to chew it off his ears, because he decides it's too long. Again, Cameron, you're quite right on the Germans learning about Q ships and derivatives in Model 1 and being still they're likely to support the trap. Right. Yes, and also have to remember the Germans are doing a lot of Q ship-like things in World War II with their own surface radar program. What's the German radar like at this time? It's okay. German radar isn't necessarily bad. It's what it can be used for. There's the whole problem with German radar and with most radar types is what you're developing it for. So radar can be very good and very capable, but if you've not developed it for the right things, it won't do those jobs. Radar is very specific in this period. It's not a case of software changes, it's a case of hardware changes to change its roles. King of Norway? No. Again... what was that guy that dropped to the UK and had the Germans sending all sorts of money for fake spy rings he supposedly set up? Was that Garbo? No, that wasn't Garbo. That was oh, I forgot the name, but there was someone who did. Royals again. That's not gonna. And also they have to be traveling from America to Britain, and you don't really want to fake kill off a royal because of the issues it creates. And the only royal who you'd have to know immediately if they were killed will be the king. So here's the thing. Put out a fake broadcast that the king is dead. Watch what happens to British morale. That's not something you're going to do. That's the kind of problem, or Princess Elizabeth died. Again, it's going to damage morale so much you just don't want to go there. And it can also create all sorts of problems with succession crises. Because once it's out there, you then have to spend your entire time going, no, it was all a fake. So, no, you're not going to do that. No, you okay? What? Hello. What are you up to? Are you trying to fall off this bed? Hello. So, even in breaking out, when they're trying to get out, they're having trouble. And also, at this point, while they're getting out, Tovey has sitting in Scarpa Flow, he has Nelson, he has Rodney, and he has Repulse, plus 8 cruisers and 11 destroyers. So, that's a fairly capable force. If they had had enough information and been able to get in the right position, that would have been an interesting battle. Let's be honest, Nelson and Rodney plus Repulse versus 8 cruisers and 11 destroyers. Let's be honest, Repulse and 8 cruisers, that could be enough to slow down Shameless and Eisenhower enough that they don't get away from Nelson and Rodney. In which case, Nelson and Rodney win that fight. Nelson Rodney versus Scharnhorst and Eisenhower is not even an approximate of a fair fight. Would we agree? You just want to be patted. Okay. Actually, there is a problem with the convoys at this time. It's not like the later Russian ones when they aren't making theoretical juicy targets like JL-58A and 58B. Though I'd rather you than me take on Belfast. Everyone would rather take on Belfast and another of those ships which has disturbingly weird luck. Did we have to? So, they break out. The British are all over the place. When the British start doing their air patrols, and then eventually they detach the home fleet. The home fleet moves out of Scarpa Flow on the 25th of January. I've already talked about, I mentioned the 25th of January being a key date for them moving up, but 20th of January they learn, 25th of January they're moving out, And that is the force that moves out from Scarp and Flow, is being, as discussed, Nelson and Rodney plus Repulse. Plus 8 cruisers and 11 destroyers. That's a fairly balanced fleet. Stop trying to lick my keys. I'm having to hide my keys currently. He's got into a love of licking them. Ay, caramba. And the trouble is, he licks them so much, I'm worried he's going to deaden the battery. Robert Dennett, if they actually went with decoy ambush plan with a fake agent, what would they likely send if they knew an all-out brawl with both battleships? If they knew it was going to be an all-out brawl with both battleships, and they were using a decoy to get them in close, they'd want to have things which were fast enough to catch them. So they'd want King George V, they might want Prince of Wales if she's available, they want Hood, Renown, Repulse, because those 5 could conceivably catch Scharnhorst and Gneisenau and stop them running away. And you'd want Nelson and Rodney there as well to guarantee the kill. But what you might do is have a carrier group stationed over the horizon and have the carriers hit them to slow them down and then have the capital ships appear. So that's, the signal would just be go out, boom, boom, and then the carrier, the carrier aircraft would launch and would strike them. You'd probably do something like that. Interesting. Nelson vs. Scharnhorst is Mike Tyson versus Bantam weight level mismatch. Yes, the thing is, the Bantams can run away as long as they haven't been injured. If either of them are injured, they're in trouble. Phil Cameron, how about the Duke of Windsor? He has the benefit of being on the correct side of the Atlantic and doesn't cause any succession issues. Mostly that's a problem because they didn't trust him to do anything like this. They didn't trust the Duke of Windsor at all. They wanted him kept as far away and they didn't trust him in any way, shape or form. So, no. And again, he's not senior enough at that point after he's out of succession to justify breaking radio silence to signal about anything happening to him. Now, on the 26th of January, Lutyens was planning on refueling. And he decided against it, decided to proceed directly south of Iceland, because he felt the weather conditions would hide his battleships from the British. And then on the 28th of January, they detected HMS Naid along another cruiser by their radar. So their radar is working quite well south of Iceland. They were the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were then sighted by Naid 6 minutes later. Lutyens didn't know whether the rest of the home fleet was at sea, and he decided to break off his attempt to enter the Atlantic at this point, and they turned northeast and went to the Norwegian Sea and north of the Arctic Circle. At this point, they dispatched one of Gneisenau's aircraft to Trondheim to carry a report on the events of the day, and that, of course, didn't manage to rejoin its ship. This is the thing, when you send off aircraft on missions like that, they're not going to get to rejoin their ships. They really don't. They're going to go too far away for too long a time. They're not going to get to rejoin their fleet and rejoin their ships. They're gone. So that's always a thing. If you're sending off aircraft to do those sorts of missions, those sort of message and information transfer missions, you're losing that aircraft. And it has a factor in availability, because you go down to one aircraft, and then if its spare parts go, oh frigate, you're down to 0 aircraft. Now, Tovey isn't sure whether Naid actually sighted the German warships, so he sails west and then returns to Scapa Flow on the 30th of January. Hipper departs Brest on the 1st of February to begin its raid. And this is another complication for the British, because Hipper's off raiding at the same time. Hello, what have you got? Where do you keep getting all these seeds from? Hello. What does Lutyens do at this point? He refuels. This is the advantage for this whole operation in Berlin, in that it's rather a contrast to Shima, which I was talking about yesterday, because Berlin has all this refueling set up, all these operations set up to refuel. I mean, yes, Shima had coal supply set up, which was one of the reasons why they had to go when they went, but they also have the inability to call that fuel on demand, and that fuel is never really enough for what they need to do. Now, very quickly, they start searching for one of their primary targets, and their primary targets, as I mentioned earlier, is an HX convoy. That's a Halifax to home convoy. What are you trying to do now? What are you up to? Okay. Hello. Yeah, I know you've had a weird evening and you've had a weird day. I know. He does like being groomed. Ay, caramba. Now, their primary target, and the convoy they're really keen on, was HX-106. Why? Well, let's look at this ship, this convoy, and let's see what they've got there. If I can expand it out, click it on. You have Abercross, which is 6,076 tons. You have Arthur F. Cohen, which is 10,516 tons. Albrecht, 6,568 tons. Batouan, 5,848 tons, which has the Vice Commodore aboard. We have, all the way down, you have British Fortune, which is nearly 4,696 tons. You can see these are all quite big merchant ships at their time. All very, very big merchant ships for their time. You even have a 13,000 ton San Fabian in there. And 12,000 Geo McKnight. You also have some Norwegian ships there, which show how important Norway being involved in World War II was for the British in terms of their merchant fleet. This is a very large, very important convoy. There are literally hundreds of thousands of tons worth of supplies coming across in this convoy. And it has an appropriate escort due to the importance of those supplies. The escort includes Burnham, a Town-class destroyer, Collingwood, a Flower-class corvette, King Cup, a Flower-class corvette, Le Moine, a Flower-class corvette, Malcolm, an Admiralty-type destroyer leader, World War I era ship destroyer which has been upgraded. Her Majesty's, I would call them, His Majesty's trawler, Northern Pride, but some people insist on calling them HMS as well. An anti-submarine trawler, and HMS Ramillies, Revenge-class battleship, HMS Saladan, S-class destroyer, HMS Sarons, an S-class destroyer, again World War I era, and Skate, World War I R-class destroyer, and HMT Vezania, an anti-submarine warfare trawler. So again, it's a fairly good force. And let's be honest, it's not something which an individual ship or even a pair of Scharnhorst really wants to get involved in a fight with. Those destroyers might not be carrying torpedoes. They might be orientated for long-range anti-submarine operations. Ugh. But the thing is, they are there. And they can provide HMS Ramillies with smoke to protect her. They can provide support. And what you also have to consider, and I think I'm losing the battle against the poodle here, that you also have to consider is that this wider force, this structure, is capable of covering quite a lot of the convoy. Now, the point that often gets made with this convoy is this is the problem for Germany. Ramillies is not the most modern battleship in the world, but she's there. Shannon and Nainarsenau are, even with the occupation of France and Norway, are a long way from home. They are outnumbered many, many times over. Any damage, anything which slows them down, anything which limits their ability to maneuver and their strategic repositioning is going to cause them trouble. Anything which does that is going to cause them trouble. And that trouble comes with a capital T. So a ship like Ramillies sitting there, that means it's a non-viable convoy for them. Even if they'd had Bismarck with them, the odds are it's still not really a viable convoy. The only advantage is that, whereas their scenario and idea was one of them tried to lure Ramillies away and the other one engaged the convoy, Ramillies wouldn't leave the convoy. So the thing you have to do is you have to do enough damage to Ramillies quickly enough that she is put out of the operation. That she is not able to effectively defend the convoy. And that's where you get the advantage if you have Shameless and Gneisenau against one. Where you have Shameless, Gneisenau, Bismarck and Tirpitz. Because if you have 4 ships versus 1 R-class, there is no way the R-class doesn't get damaged sufficiently in the first couple of salvos to knock her out effectively from any fighting. And if they can then avoid her on whatever of her remains, they can carry on and destroy the convoy in detail. That's when you get the problems. But Shameless and Gneisenau on their own, yes, they've got very powerful 11-inch guns. Yes, those 11-inch guns are very capable and very powerful. But are they going to do enough damage quickly enough that she doesn't get to damage them to the point at which they're dead? We standing here for a reason. Yes, okay. This month is becoming a very poodle-orientated video month, isn't it? Hello. Now let's see. Oh, those bits are attached. If you get a 15-inch hit to a fuel bunker, it means you aren't going home. The 14-inch to Bismarck that makes her leak fuel that shows that. Yes. If you get a 15-inch, let's say the 15-inch shell hits your fire control system or any of your superstructure, you could end up losing your radar, losing all your radio systems. She doesn't have to cause a lot of damage. She doesn't have to sink them. She just has to cause enough damage. And the thing is, while they're fighting her, A, the convoy can maneuver away, and yes, again, those destroyers can assist her. But B, other ships can respond. You are not going to do, with Shameless and Gneisenau, you are not going to knock out Ramillies quickly enough that she does not get to radio for help. You might be able to knock out a force of corvettes quickly enough. You might be able to knock out a force of destroyers quickly enough. That's why you have your secondaries. But you cannot knock out even a World War I not reconstructed R-class quickly enough that she will not be getting off signals to home, to someone to come help. She's too solid a construction. Remember, this is a vessel built in a time when they believed they were going to be engaging in Jutland-style battles. That makes a difference. Cope Foul Tishao. What about Royal Air Force and US Air Force long-range assets? There aren't really many of those around. At this point, there's still it's sort of Wellington bombers, which are the basis for most long-range assets. And you have to remember this is before the Americans enter World War II. So the US Air Force, American Air Force, United States Army Air Force are not part of this. It's all the Royal Air Force. I don't believe the Duke of Windsor ever actually agreed anything, but he was potentially a useful idiot. because he'd already been shown to be an idiot. And the thing is, he could have believed, oh, it's for the good of the nation. I shall take up leadership because I will be able to moderate the dictatorship. I'll be able to moderate them with my power, whereas my brother can't because he's boxed himself into a corner. So I will lead our people and protect them. I could hear that. You can hear the mental rationale as you think it through. No, it just don't go there. Seafold, what happened on the 10th of February? We haven't really got to the 10th of February yet. I'm going to talk about sort of the convoy and when it was sort of sighted and was attacked, but the thing is they have various issues. How did a fast Second World War ship need to be? How fast did a Second World War ship need to be in order to effectively neutralize submarine risk, assuming it was doing standard precautions? Just travelling along at 18 knots was usually enough if you were zigzagging. You could do slower if you were zigzagging enough, but you wanted to be zigzagging. Cop fouls to shout. What would a day or night attack be more likely in this scenario? What scenario? We're talking about the actual historical events at the moment. I have discussed other potential scenarios, but if you're attacking Ramleys as they did, if we consider what they actually did? When they spotted HX-106, they sighted it at dawn on the 8th of February. They didn't realise Ramleys was there. They separated to attack the convoy. Shanos was approaching it from the south, Gneisenau from the northwest. Shanos' crew spot Ramleys at 09:47 hours. They report this to Gneisenau, which is of course Lütjen's flagship. At which point, Lütjen cancels the attack. Shanos' captain, Kurt Caesar Hoffmann, brings Scharnhorst within 12 miles of the convoy, attempting to draw Ramleys away to enable Gneisenau to attack the merchant vessels. It was a violation of orders. It was a violation of Lütjen's orders, and so Lütjen did reprimand Hoffmann by radio. But the fact is, when Ramleys' crew is looking out, they reckon what they're seeing is an Admiral Hipper class cruiser. And Tovey believed it was either Admiral Hipper or Admiral Scheer, and decided to sail with all available ships to intercept it if should it return to Germany or France. So that's what happens. The Germans are getting close. They spot Ramleys. Ramleys spots them and thinks it's an Admiral Hipper class. They're basically spotting Scharnhorst and thinking, that looks like an Admiral Hipper. That doesn't look like a battleship. That looks like Admiral Hipper. They're that not worried about it. The Germans pretty much see it go, that's too much firepower. That's not something we want to go mess with. Despite HX-106 being really their critical target. Now, when Tovey thinks there's an Admiral Scheer out, or Admiral Hipper, he organises his forces into 3 task forces, adds in Wellington aircraft patrols. He has Force H, which is of course renowned and at Hark Royal, is ordered also into to protect convoys in North Atlantic. And it sails from Gibraltar on the 12th of February and returns to Gibraltar on the 25th of February. And it's at this point, with all this going around, that Navy Group West, in terms from analysing British signals traffic intelligence, i.e. the communications going on, decides that Britain has spotted them. They decide that the reason there's such an uptick in movement is that Britain has spotted Lütjens. And Lütjens at this point goes, well, Admiral Hipper's doing attacks elsewhere. Hopefully that diverts British attentions. So I'm going to stop doing my operations, and I'm going to wander around. This meant that he returns to the waters off southern Greenland and remains there from roughly the 10th to the 17th. Sort of late on the 9th, early on the 10th, he gets in the area. Now, sadly enough, this means that he's sitting right in the path of a storm, which takes place on 12th of February. This storm damages Sharnhorst's gun turrets. Thank you, North Atlantic. It takes 3 days. They're not back in service till the 15th. It also damages Gneisenau's engines, and they need to be repaired as they become contaminated with seawater. And the battleships have to refuel from the Scheltzad and the tanker the ESO Hamburg on the 14th of February because they have to flush quite a lot of fuel because it's got contaminated with seawater. Okay, please note, this is really not a good scenario for them. The North Atlantic is doing damage here. This is another point. This is something which it does illustrate the Royal Navy's point when they're designing their aircraft carriers, how they don't do deck parking because of the North Atlantic and the North Sea. Well, here's the thing. The North Atlantic is actually doing more damage and more attrition on German surface ships in this operation than the British have so far by this point. So, Shu, in the case of Operation Berlin, they were attacking during the daytime. How close do the Scharnhorst have to be to penetrate Ramley's belt armour? Well, as has been pointed out, the Revengeance have a better armour layout than the Queen Elizabeth class when they were first built. That's an improved version. So it's not a good. It's close, and yes, the 11 inches gun is good, but as also is pointed out by Verdun, Ramley's broadside is 15,504 pounds, or that's 7 tons roughly, and the Scharnhorsts are cumulatively 6,500 pounds, or nearly 3 tons each. Which means Ramley's has more throw weight than both of them combined. That's the thing. You're dealing with an 15-inch gun, 15-inch gun battleship versus two 11-inch gunships, and it all adds up. They could probably penetrate. I know Navy Weps has it as a reckoning at 15 kilometers, 16,500 yards. But the question is, do you want to get within 18,000 yards of a British battleship? Do you really want to get within 18,000 yards of Ramley's? Because that's the kill range. The British have this whole doctrine about long-range fire to suppress and damage enemy, but they like to get to 18,000 yards, which is what they call their decisive engagement range. So if you get to 18,000 yards or less, you're getting into what the British crews are heavily trained to kill at. If you go through all the guns, there's a reason why the British test all their 8-inch, 6-inch. Every single gun type they can which can reach that far is tested for it. Has its capabilities tested and logged for 18,000 yards. That's true, but Ramley's would probably only target one ship. Why? She's got independent fire control. She can put the forward turrets on one ship and the aft turrets on the other. But also, there's the fact that if Scharnhorst and Gneisenau are split up, she only has to fight one ship at a time. If one's attacking from the south and one's attacking from the north, she only has to fight the one to the south and then go deal with the one from the north. And remember, she doesn't have to chase them. They're coming to her convoy. As long as she's with the convoy, they have to kill her. But also, if she's mixed in with the convoy, She's amongst a load of ships. They're trying to spot her. They're trying to visually identify her. She can hide within the convoy and fire from within the convoy. Destroyers can stick up smoke, all sorts of things. The radar, they don't have radar for control, fire control at that good a level that they can pick out what the individual targets are. They can tell you where targets are. They can't tell you what those targets are at this point with the fire control and with the radar. And if you've got smoke and other things up, then their visual systems aren't going to work, but their visual systems will pick up you, because you'll be hiding in a mess. You'll be visible. And it also, the other thing cut fast too, what does she have to do to win? What is a win for Ramillies? A win for Shameless and Night now is sinking the convoy and her. Or sinking the majority of the convoy. A win for Ramillies is sinking either one of them, or damaging either of them enough that they have to withdraw. That's all she's fighting for. She's not fighting for victory, she's fighting for a draw. She's fighting for them to have to be forced away, and if they're forced away damaged, they're going to be prey to something else nastier and bigger. We've already talked about the various groups out hunting for them. Let's say they engage her. Let's say they, they're fighting the battle. If they win the fight, one of them is probably sunk. Especially if they have to get down to 18,000 yards for penetration, but they probably don't have to, because let's be honest, what you're dealing with is a cumulative hit scenario. And that is where they do have an advantage, is they're firing 18 shells to hers 8. So, that's a salvo advantage, but it doesn't matter because she's not fighting to kill them. If she does kill them, great. If she damages them, though, that's a bigger problem for them because they have to try and get home. Remember, she's fighting in the North Atlantic. That is as close as you're going to get to a British sea at this point. Yes, the Germans are able to wander around, but who really has control of the sea? Can the Germans move convoys across the North Atlantic? No. Can the Germans send trade ships across the North Atlantic? No. They can try and dispute British control, but they can't achieve control themselves. So what happens to an injured German capital ship? Well, Bismarck's a good story in that. A good example of that. Once they're injured, they're prey. The cut fast through, but as he said, it would fight one ship, the other might be able to push into the convoy. We trade against the orders, and in the end, not a worthwhile trade. Yes, but also, let's put it this way, if you push into a convoy, there are also destroyers and other things sitting in that convoy. And those destroyers might not have torpedoes, no, but if you're pushing into a convoy to try and kill it, well, what happens if a destroyer sets off depth charges in front of you? Remember, that's what caused most of the damage to the Hipper from glowworm. Wasn't actually glowworms hitting her, it was the depth charges. So again, there are lots of problems for trying to get into that convoy. If you've just got one thing to deal with, you can do it. If you've got both the destroyers and Ramillies, that's a very different problem. Calm Gaswick, and there are the tyranny and endless those restrictive orders for the channels. Had the cruise been in 5 or 8, then it's different. But then ordered not to engage significant British forces, and that's their problem. So they withdraw. However, they do cite some merchant ships sailing individually. They find a recently dispersed convoy, some ships from a recently dispersed convoy, about 500 miles east of Newfoundland, and they managed to sink 5 of the vessels. They jammed radio transmissions while doing that, and all sorts of things. But one of the ships did actually manage to transmit a sighting report of being attacked by an aircraft that had been launched from the battleships. This signals past the Admiralty, And this is when they realise, the Admiralty realises that it's battleships out in the West Atlantic. And they start to realise that Naid had been right, and all sorts of things start to be fitted together. Lutyens, again, hears that the British are reacting, and so he decides that he's going to change his target strategy. He's going to go for another major convoy route, the SL convoys. Now, SL convoys are northbound from Sierra Leone to Liverpool, hence SL. They have a lot less data written about them than the HX convoys. Please note, I'm going to apologise for this now, but there is a lot less data written about them. I'm going to have to do a lot of more primary research myself for this one. And you have 275 convoys run from Sierra Leone to Liverpool. Of those, it seems 27 convoys were attacked, so less than 10% just. And a total of 78 ships were lost across those 27 convoys. We're not quite sure how many ships were involved, but if you consider an average convoy size was possibly 20 to 30 ships, let's go for 20 to put it on the small side. If you 275 times 20, well, that to me is 5,500 ship journeys, and of those which 78 are lost. It's fairly decent numbers, but those are my aggregate estimate averages. Actually, for done, trading World War I era super dreadnought for a fast battleship is a trade where Britain doesn't want to lose a peace, but if it has to, World War II, it will happily take. It's taking a look at a rook for a bishop or knight. True, and also it's going to lead to renaming a vanguard. Let's be honest, if Ramillies went down fighting... Okay, let's put the scenario. Ramillies goes down fighting Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. She takes them out. Now, if she survives, she's going to get refitted and repaired because it's status ship. If she gets sunk, then they're going to rename Vanguard Ramillies, aren't they? In her honour. It's going to be going to be the British scenario. You sank a Ramillies, don't worry, here comes another Ramillies. It's the whole propaganda effect. So that's not a good thing for the Germans equally. And the British actually build a lot of capital ships in World War II, especially compared to the Germans. They don't build as many as the Americans build, but they build a lot. Remember, the British have the trouble is that many of their prime yards are also getting bombed at the same time as they're trying to build from them. So it causes all sorts of issues. It's really annoying. Circle of Doom. I hope not the Circle of Doom. I hope not the Circle of Doom. Signal is improving. Signal is improving. Okay. Alright. Hello, everyone. Yes, not sure why the satellite link is proving so spicy this evening. I'm going to use the phrase spicy. Colin Cameron, do an HMS Spitfire and get below the guns. Then if it's a Canadian destroyer, they would try to board. They would. Abzowski, I guess some HMS Eskimo or other destroyer would gladly sacrifice her bow just to damage a Scharnhorst. Not to mention using it as a makeshift corvus for boarding. Potentially. It's happening intermittently. I'm sorry to hear that. The satellite link has so far been incredibly good. So far been incredibly good for this so far. But I do apologise. I will say I have been... It's happening when you're Antonio switching from satellite to satellite. Might be doing that. Might also be wet. Hang on, no. Actually, it usually seems to perform better in the rain. I have to praise Musk more. Well, honestly, I'm not going to say anything bad about Starlink for this trip because it's dealt with all the issues. It's dealt with the fact that whilst we are live and I'm doing this recording, this live chat with you all, I'm fairly sure my sister is also doing stuff on her computer. She's not also doing a live transmission, but she's got some work going on a computer, which is involving the various, virtual drives, etc. So it's dealing with all that data requirement, and it's doing well. And then, of course, there's also my mum connected to the Wi-Fi, and I'm fairly certain... I'm not sure which phone game she's currently playing, but I think she's got one or two armed up. Caramba. Now, he decided to go after these West African convoys. He decided to refuel from the Ermland and the Frederick Brown and head southeast. Now, here is the other problem for him, because the SL convoys were supposed to be... How do I put this politely? The SL convoys were supposed to be easy pickings. After all, they're coming up the African coast. Why would the British have any heavy weapons with them? Why would the British have anything there to protect them? Oh yeah. So he's just had a bump into an R-class. Could things get worse? Well, yes, it turns out they can. He managed to find SL-67, which has the next level up worse from an R-class to find, escorting a convoy. Yes, it is HMS Malaya. HMS Malaya is, of course, a veteran of many battles. A very experienced vessel. Let's see, she had fought through the First World War, including, of course, Jutland and the action of 19th August, action of 19 August 1918, I think it was, wasn't it? In 1916. She had taken part in various issues during during the interwar years. She hadn't had her reconstruction, but she does end up in the Second World War. And she takes part in the Battle of Calabria against Conte de Cavour and Guillaume on 9th of June 1940. So she's already been in action in this war. She fired several guns and was focusing on the Conte de Cavour. She was mainly there to support Warspite, but, you know, she was doing all sorts of things. She'd shelled Genoa in February 1914 as part of Operation Grog. Sadly enough, this included firing a 15-inch armour-piercing shell into the southeast corner of Genoa's cathedral. The fuse failed to detonate, so it didn't go off, but, you know. But, yeah. Here she is. Operation Berlin, they're going out, they're looking for the convoys and the easy picking. The HX convoys, they knew there might be something issue. They knew the British had R-class operating out of Halifax, occasionally their battleships. So, you know, fine, let's go down to the South Atlantic. Let's go down to the African coast ones. That's Malaya! That's not fair. You can just imagine Lutyens' mind. He's sort of going... What do the British do? Have an endless supply of 15-inch gun battleships just wandering around? Is every convoy now escorted by either an R-class or a Queen Elizabeth class? At this point, you have to wonder if he was having nightmares about Warspite chasing him, because everywhere he goes is a 15-inch battleship. Candy Crush? No. My mum goes for the she likes the brain teaser games, all the sort of the games which are based on, I call them Cluedo, but a programmed Cluedo, because the kind of games she likes. Any sort of game which is puzzle solving and trying to work out who done it, that's what my mum's playing on her phone. Bishop, new Bright Lane City train service in Florida uses Starlink. SpaceX started the service stated the service is now in the black. Doesn't surprise me. H for done. If your sister can teach engineering like you do history, then I will watch your YouTube channel. She can, and I keep suggesting she do an engineering channel. So does Drac suggest she do an engineering channel. But I think that them doing an engineering channel together would frankly be amazing. I think my sister explaining flood defenses. There is actually a video somewhere around of her on Kingston University website, I think it was, of her explaining flood defenses, and she basically causes an entire earthen wall to collapse to show how it how it can go wrong. Yes. Lutyens at this point was probably thinking that the Royal Navy had turned 15-inch gun battleships into the equivalent of the town-class cruisers from World War One, in that you never knew where one was going to be, but there was always going to be one somewhere. Americucci, it's worse than that. Every time he finds a new convoy, the RN trades up to a better battleship. Next convoy would have a nail rod. Potentially. Potential. Bishon, how would a 13.5-inch super dreadnought do to World War II? Do as a World War II convoy squad? It would be enough. It really doesn't. You have to be enough to be able to cause damage. That's the thing. So a 13.5-inch super dreadnought would have done fine for this job. Biomass, Sonorous worst nightmare is finding the entire hourglass stuck around them full of sharks. Potentially, considering their top speed was 31 knots, and the Iowa class could do 33 knots fully loaded, 35 knots plus if they were lightly loaded. Let's be honest, the Iowa class could literally be circling around them. It's just not nice, the British. It's just not nice. So what does... Well, Lutyens has to be... They sight the convoy. It's northeast of Cape Verde. And Lutyens has to be content with alerting German submarines to the convoy's location. And basically they decided the plan would be the submarines sink Malaya, and then the battleships would take out the merchant ships. The submarines ambush the convoy that night. They sink 5 ships. They miss Malaya. The Germans go and, Lutyens goes and tries to find the convoy again. He's lost the convoy during the night. At 13:30 hours, he finds the convoy. He decides to attack it at 17:30 hours. But then Malaya is appeared as going, Hello, I'm fine. Come to me, my pretties. I can't chase you down, but come to me. I've got 15-inch guns cleared for action. I'm looking forward for you. Yes, I see you both. Come to me. Come on. I might not be modernized like Warspite, but I feel some Warspite energy coming across me. And so, yeah. At this point, he goes to high speed, i.e. maxes out the speed of Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and tells them to get away, because Malaya is looking, well, I'm going to use this word describer, very fresh and very keen. Yeah. Dreadnought possibly wouldn't have been enough, but, there is a Mull's Revenge, but there is a certain argument that that the original King George V's and Iron Dukes would have been enough. During Virgin, Warren proceeds to arm King George V's with triple 15-inch guns. Lutyens cries. It is not good. How would the Alaska class have fared against the Scharnhorst? Oh, I would give the Alaska class even odds. Because they have very, very good fire controls and a lot of 12-inch guns. And very good 12-inch guns. Probably, the Scharnhorst have probably better subdivision. But if the Alaska class can fight one at a time, and using their speed and a convoy, they probably could engage one at a time. If they could do one at a time, then they could win it. If you can hear Zebedee, the fluffy research assistant, is currently complaining, I'm fairly sure it's food time. And he hasn't been fed yet. Again, not my job this evening. So, the trouble is, though, there's another small issue with going after the SL convoys. Just a small issue. I just wanted to be known as just a small issue. But Lucian's old, how do I put this? Old nightmare, aka Renown, along with Ark Royal in Force H and HMS Sheffield, hear about her on the 8th of March, and hear about Lucian's trying to take out a convoy. At which point, Somerville, with his entire force, is basically steaming out going, "Come to us! We're coming for you!" And Malaya is straining to try and leave her convoy to do a sort of V-in and charge up behind them. So there is another possibility at this point of them ending up as a sandwich, as the filling in a sandwich between Malaya on one side, Renown and Ark Royal on the other side. I don't think Shanos and Eisenhower want to be part of that sandwich. They are good ships. They are capable ships. They have good armor. They have good crews. They don't want to be part of that sandwich. Again, I think we should just consider the Germans lucky that Warspite is currently being prepared by Cunningham for Matapan, having been promised some Italian heavy cruiser biscuits. It's interesting. How long is sort of fluffy research as an Easter as well? I don't have his food in here. I am tempted to go check on him, but he's mid telling someone off. I don't want to disturb him. However, I really do wish there was a book entitled The Adventures of Force H. The random stuff Force H ends up getting up to is quite interesting. Alaska vs. Shanos. If memory serves, when Alaska was commissioned, Shanos was sunk, so there's an extension of fire control issue. There is, but the fact you can sort of theorize what it would have been like if they had fought each other, and usually I use Gneisenau as the example. What is the action range of the Malaya's secondaries? Would they have been able to damage Shanos unarmed parts when they close in at sinking range with 11-inch guns? Let's see. Her secondaries. Well, she had the 6-inch guns, didn't she? So their maximum fire range is 19,660 yards, basically 19.5 kilometers or 21,500 yards. Yeah, at 18,000 yards, they'd have been causing damage, and let's be honest, 6-inch guns are not nice. But they are casemated 6-inch guns, so they have interesting time in terms of getting on their target. But she does have a fair number of them, so yeah. Let's put it this way. She has 7 either side. That's going to have an impact. As built. The cries of the fluffy research assistance people have been heard. They have been. They have been heard. You should also remember that he also critiques the amount of food you're giving him, where you're putting the bowl, and whether you're providing enough. Black Maximus, old history. Hood survives Denmark Straits, and it's Hood, not Ramleys, that Shanos and Eisenhower find. No, because this is before Denmark Straits. Hood is still around, wandering around this one. It's very nearly Hood that they find anyway, because they return north. And yes, they return north, and they are refueled on way. Again, this is a great sort of thing. They managed to sink an unescorted merchant vessel, the SS Marathon, on the 9th of March. But basically, they're both suffering from mechanical issues. Eisenhower's auxiliary systems were severely in need of maintenance. Shanos was actually worse than Eisenhower. Her superheaters were at this point defective, and the pipes that move steam around the engines had been damaged. Mostly by the North Atlantic. This is the thing. Most of the damage that's been done, in fact, pretty much all the damage that's been done to Shameless and Eisenhower during this operation, is by the North Atlantic. It's one of those things you start looking at and go, frigate. The North Atlantic is basically ripping these ships apart from the inside out. They refueled for the land augment during the 11th and 12th of March. And it's at this point they plan to go and search for shipping together. Again, up in the north. Now, this doesn't necessarily result in a good thing, because whilst you do have the good old Altmech out, renamed Uckermark, out wandering around, and you do have the Ermland to refuel them, and all these things help. There's a serious question you have to ask at this point. A serious question. There are problems in the north, because so far, wherever they've gone, in the north they've found ships escorting convoys, and then in the south they found Malaya escorting a convoy, and Tovey thinks about this, and so there are two key convoys wandering around. So the HX convoys leaving on the 17th and the 21st of March, well, the one on the 17th gets HMS King George V as its escort. The one on the 21st of March gets HMS Rodney as its escort. Very happy ships going, come on, keep bumping into convoys. Come on, Shameless and Eisenhower, come and bump into us. You can imagine that scenario for Shameless and Eisenhower. They bump into... the one on the 17th of March. How fast is King George V supposed to go? Yeah, he's chasing us. And they jump into the one on the 21st of March. Hello, I'm Rodney. How fast are you going? Is it enough to get away from me? There are two of you? Oh, goody. Listen, the British don't seem to have as many issues just staying afloat. I'll delete that comment, but the thing is, you have to remember the British have been building ships and continuing to build ships during this period. They've been continuing to operate battleships, and the British continue to operate their ships worldwide. So they test their ships. They still suffer from damage. Trust me, the North Sea, North Atlantic still takes its toll. But the thing about the British is A, they've got more yards they can get them into and get them repaired in quickly. And B, because of their greater experience of operating in those areas, they have prepared their ships better to deal with it. Sometimes the Shameless used partly cased ammunition, and the casing ejection hole in turrets was flooded frequently. Yeah, there's all sorts of fun. There's all sorts of funs. During Passion, Lucian seeing more battleships escorting goes, why are we here? Just to suffer. It's just not nice. But the thing is, please note, now, Tovey is also, this is the point he puts to sea with Nelson, Nigeria, HMS Nigeria, and two escorting destroyers. They take a position south of Iceland. Their job is to try and intercept the raiders when they're returning to Germany. Between the 15th and 16th of March, Lutyens encounters merchant vessels around the Cape Race area. Gneisenau manages to sink 3 tankers which are straggling from HX 114, and 3 other tankers, the Bianca, San Casimiro and Polycarp, are captured and dispatched to France with prize crews. They sink 10 more merchant vessels the next day from a recently dispersed westbound convoy. And this is a big trouble for the British. Once you disperse convoys into what is theoretically the American sphere of influence and where Britain's been letting them go because they're away from the submarine threat, so they disperse them so they can escort the convoys back. The Germans are going into the fine area between that and American territorial waters and are trying to hoover up those convoys. those merchant ships. This is, of course, when the famous event happens where Rodney, pursuing some contact reports, having left her convoy, sights Gneisenau, while Gneisenau is trying to rescue survivors of one of the ships she'd sunk on the 16th of March. This is when, well, there's a full debate about what actually happens. Rodney comes tearing over the horizon from Rodney's reports. And from the German reports, they split. The German reports are, we got away and she didn't spot us, to the she chased us. And we were going, we didn't start making distance until we were over 26 knots. Well over 26 knots. They weren't sure. They then go back and they pick up the survivors, from Ronnie does, and then they learn they were chasing Gneisenau. But again, the thing is, they know it's a Scharnhorst type battleship they're chasing. They're just not sure whether it's Scharnhorst or Gneisenau. And again, you can, at the distances, you can understand not being able to work out the difference between the two. There are some differences. Please note, there are some differences, but there are enough similarities. It's going to be difficult to make it out unless you are within 18,000 yards, probably. Excellent. I'm starting to realise why Scharnhorst 5 referred to Scharnhorst as Hitler's lucky ship until she met Belfast's impenetrable plot armour like in King George V. Anyway, yeah, she met HMS Duke of York. That's never a good experience. Duke of York seemed to be fairly effective warships in British history, despite the whole thing about the Duke of York had 10,000 men, marched them up the hill and marched them down again. Marched them up to the top of the hill and marched them down, again, all sorts of things, because of what he got up to. I think it was in the Netherlands. And Low Countries when he was leading expedition, but Duke of York's ships seemed to be quite effective in Royal Navy services. Black Muslims. Machine spirits are angry and get Nelson Rodney to 28 knots. Can Scharnhorst and Gneisenau escape in time? Depends how slow they're going. Gneisenau was going. If Gneisenau had been going a knot slower than she had been before she started building up speed, I think Rodney might have caught her at 26 knots, let alone if she'd be going 28 knots. Following the attacks on the 15th and 16th, with the Admiralty not quite sure what Lutyens's intentions are, his force is going to attempt to return to Germany via one of the Iceland routes. George V is dispatched to patrol Halifax area. Didn't encounter them. And Tovey strengthens the cruiser patrols on the possible German return routes and gathers his force south of Iceland. Force H are moved into the North Atlantic. Always fun when the Admiralty move Force H into the North Atlantic. And the RAF, well, Coastal Command tries to do some effective air patrols over the Denmark Strait and waters between Iceland and Faroes between 17th and 20th of March. Duke of York was actually a very good administrator of the army, made a lot of important reforms. Not a great field general, but then you had Wellington for that. Yes. Plus, I'd argue that Duke of York was always kind of in a trouble as a field general, because he always had a lot of, how do I put this? Filtration between him and what was going on. His staff was overly managed because it was a royal staff. So there were lots of people who wanted to be on there because they wanted to be close to the royal general. And so you have a very inefficient staff, which inhibits the general from actually hearing what he needs to hear. Because lots of people don't want to tell the royal general what's really going on in case it displeases him. And that causes problems. Whereas when he's the administrator, it's not as promising a posting. And he's very effective at posting people away from him to various commands around the world. So he turns out to be a very effective administrator, but the fact is, as a field general, he had issues with his staff structure. Oh, it was Battle of Wakefield. He was marching top of the hill, then marching down and again halfway back where they're attacking the ambush. 1460. Thank you, Leslie Mitchell. That's a different Duke of York than the one I was thinking about. But yeah, I think I was thinking Duke of York in the Napoleonic era, who was the one who marched all around. Who the song was about, I think. So basically, they have problems. Robert Downer, what if they paired both Deutschland-class cruisers as well in Operation Berlin? Then they would have been restricted in speed. Deutschland-class cannot go as fast as Scharnhorst-class. The Deutschland-class are better surface raiders. But if they take out what's called, renamed from Deutschland to Lutzow, because they don't want to lose Germany, and the Admiral Scheer with them, so they have Lutzow, Admiral Scheer, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau. They have probably two pairs operating. The problem is, you have a pair which, frankly, can get caught by a lot of things. I have to make sure I come up with the right Deutschland class. Why do the Germans name so many things a Deutschland class? I know it's named for their country, but why? Their top speed's 28 knots. There's a lot of ships which can catch them. A lot of ships which can catch them and overtake them. So that's not a good thing for them out surface raiding at this point of the war. Captain Seagull, is the 15 and 16 action the one where an 1,800-ton Danish tramp steamer called Chilean Reefer decided that German battleship meant call for help, pop smoke and turn to engage? From memory, yes, that is one of the ones that happens during that day. Ron, if they kept enough firepower to fall together, do you think they'd have enough firepower to overpower an R-class? Well, you'd have another 12 6-inch guns. You could overpower an R-class with that level. You would have more tonnage of firepower than they operate, but you're not going to overpower it quickly. And the thing is, again, what's the damage it can do to you? So if you do that, that's fine, but the odds are you're going to lose all 4 ships. And if you lose yes, you might win against that convoy, smack that convoy and destroy that R-class, but if you lose both Scharnhorst and both Deutschlands in the fight, how's that going to affect the rest of World War II? Gilda, top speed 28 knots under good conditions, close to 26 when operating for sea time. Honestly, you're being generous. I'm going to keep them to 28 knots, but I'd say after operating this long time in the North Atlantic, I'd have said 25, 24, but I'm trying to be nice. It's like the German Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were not 31 knot ships at this point. At this point in the Operation Berlin, they are not 31 knot ships. They are possibly 30 knot, maybe 29 knot ships. They have lost at least 1, if not 2 knots, because of the damage done to their engines and systems by the North Atlantic. So that's their problem. And it really is their problem. So at this point, they're under the voyage to France. And the voyage to France is really not as... they're going as quickly as they can, because on the 20th of March, aircraft from... Hello, Zebedee! Quiet. Aircraft from Ark Royal spot them. They spot them roughly 600 miles northwest of Cape Finisterre. The aircraft's unfortunately radar was defective, which prevented them from reporting the sighting. But if they had, that could have led to a really interesting scenario. The plan was for them to return and bring the ships back so they could join Bismarck and Prince Eugen on the trip they're supposed to take in April. That's, the Germans have sent these ships out, and they're now planning Prince Eugen and Bismarck to go in April, and they feel like, Charles Eisenhower should join that. The problem is, this is March. There's at least the engines on Gneisenau are going to take 4 weeks, and they're in better condition than the Scharnhorst engines to be repaired. So you are not going to have these ships ready to go out in April. So you either delay Bismarck going out, or you don't take them with you, which is what happens. In which case, you've thrown away your opportunity. Now, Lutyens turned north to try and deceive the British air crew because they spotted the plane flying around. And so, of course, the crew, when they got back to the ship, reported that the German Lutyens was heading north. And didn't mention, of course, when they were first sighted. They didn't do a full report. But you can understand that. They were watching for a while. They didn't realise they'd been spotted. Ark Royal didn't really pass on this report to Somerville as quickly as possible. But they did locate the Bianca and the San Casimiro on 20th of March. And those ships which have been captured are actually scuttled when Renown approaches them. So the German prize crews start scuttling ships when they're approaching them. When they're sort of, rather than be captured by the British. At this point, the British are seeking to regain and try and track them. Now, they do find them again. They find them at a point when they're roughly 160 miles away from them, and that's considered too large a distance at the time of day to launch the immediate attack because they're worried about guiding everything in, and also because of the point at which Ark Royal is with her crews. Remember, the British have spent a lot of time training up their crews at night, flying and night operations. Well, as they've been churning up new squadrons to go and do things like for Illustrious, for etc. ships, and as they've been taking out people to go and do the training of crews back in the UK to train up those crews to get new squadrons, because remember, the British do a thing of veterancy. They're having to train up new people. And Ark Royal squadrons at this time, there's a bit of a... Will they really be able to do that sort of longer range night strike and get back to the ship? Fine. It's interesting enough, by the time Bismarck's out, there's no question of that. By the time Bismarck is out, they're not worried about that one at all. They they almost hit a county class, but that life happens. Excuse me a second. If you've noticed, there is a poodle up there. There is a poodle up there. There is now, though, another fluffy research assistant has joined us. Hello. He's currently hiding beneath my seat. But he is here, so you don't have to worry. He is around. He just come in and he's... I know. Get that away. Do you want to come from my lap and say hello to everyone? Do you want to? Hello. No? Okay. Corgis being corgis. Now, for everything that's going on at this point, the Germans feel a noose sort of tightening around them. They do feel a noose tightening around them. And Lutyens especially feels this at this point, because he's got reconnaissance aircraft coming in, he's got coastal command aircraft trying to come and find him, and Tovey's force to the south of Iceland, it's got Queen Elizabeth with him, it's got Hood with him, and he's got Nelson with him. He's a fairly tough force. Let's be honest, if the Germans had been going via the Iceland route, they could end up having a really nasty fight. They're heading cruisers south to try and form another cruiser line in front of France. And they're sending a destroyer flotilla from Plymouth. Unfortunately, they start to realise that the land-based aircraft in France, from German land-based aircraft in France, are now suddenly getting into the range of which they can start supporting them, and they want to try and stop them before they get that. So they try and launch a strike with Ark Royal's aircraft, but due to the issues on the 20th of March and the flying weather on the 21st and 21st of March, that doesn't happen. But still, Lockheed Hudson detects them by radar when they're 200 miles from the French coast on 21st of March. And it's unable for anyone to go and watch them. But they're watching them go in. Here, in fact, though, at this point, here is the reality for the Germans for escorting. They are escorted in by Jaguar and Littis to Brest. They're escorted in by 2 torpedo boats when they anchor there on 22nd of March. The Polycarp, the captured tanker, arrives in Bordeaux 2 days later. And the Allied sailors who've been captured from sunken ships are actually paraded through Brest before being sent to prisoner of war camps in Germany. Hipper, Admiral Hipper that is, reaches Kiel on 28th of March. Admiral Scheer docked there 2 days later. Is Raleigh literally sulking, pouting? No, that's just his normal sleeping position. He was probably slightly upset that someone else came in the room. You know, this is his bedroom after all, as far as he's concerned. So, that's a long story of basically, oh frigate, oh frigate, oh frigate. Let's be honest, neither side really covers themselves in glory. The Germans come out for a fight, and looking for a fight, and are potentially capable of having a fight, but the trouble is they keep finding things which they can't fight, so they are making a big thing of, yes, we took out these stragglers and these Morschfrei, but what they wanted was a convoy. What they wanted was to roll up an entire convoy for the image of it, and they're getting stragglers, so they're not really getting what they want. And mainly because they keep finding the British there. But the British, for all their training, for all their preparations, are unable to actually get a decent enough fix on the Germans to actually go and engage them. They have all the forces in preparation for them, but they're just not there. And who do you put the blame down to? Well, honestly, no one. That's the sad thing. It's one of those easy, it's always easiest, and this is one of my problems with revisionist history, is you always have someone to blame. But the reality of this scenario is that everyone's trying their best and everyone's in a catch-22. For the Germans, if they do get damaged, then they are not getting back to German territory, not even France. So that's why they're so risk-averse. For the Brits, you can't be everywhere. The search network, the aerial search network that will be established by 1944 is even its beginning points in 1941. We're talking, it's literally the Royal Air Force, the Royal Air Force Coastal Command And they have mostly Hudsons. They have a few Wellingtons, but mostly Hudsons. And they're trying their best, but they don't have that many aircraft, and they don't have that many pilots, and they don't have that many bases, and they're trying their best. So, really, Operation Berlin is a good example of everyone trying their best, but it becomes a bit of a farce because of that. It becomes a bit of a farce, and this is why I had this title at the beginning. This is why I have the title I do, a failure on both sides for the video, and why I have on this slide right back at the beginning, I have this. Tour de force or tour de farce. Because that's really the scenario you have to deal with. It's both. It's a force because they get out there and they do all this tour around the Atlantic. They do all the things they do. That's that's amazing. That is real capabilities. But it's a farce because then you look at what it was supposed to achieve, and doesn't happen. You look at the British and look what they're trying to achieve, and that keeps falling apart for various silly reasons. I mean, one of the things here is you've got a Swordfish aircraft whose radar actually malfunctions, and that's why they don't get told where they are. And you've got the aircrew forgetting to say which route they were on when they first spotted them. And you sit there and go, well, should they have done? Do they have to? Well, they do. That's something basic. If the observer, etc., forget to do that, then you've got a trouble. And that's the working up of the air crews. That's the working on the groups. Wikipedia, world's greatest wars ever, lists as a German victory, but it feels like a question for modern historians. Is it possible both sides lose a campaign? That's the thing. It's listed as a victory, and I can understand why it's listed as a victory, because they survive in the face of the odds of the Royal Navy, and because they do hit what they want. They hit so much and do those things. And it's certainly a propaganda victory that they achieve it, but it's also a bit of a... Well, you've got these two giant prizes. SL-67 and HX-106. These two giant prizes that would have been absolutely amazing for them to achieve, and they don't. And arguably, they don't because of the various orders they have. They don't because of the various issues they have in terms of their instructions. But also, they don't because, let's be honest, Shameless and Naval versus either Ramillies or Malaya, they've got trouble. Scharnhorst and Naval are the best the Germans can produce when they produce them. But as we've been over, fast battleships they are. Battleships you want to take up against a 15-inch battleship, even a World War I edition one, probably not. Beatty. I could blame Beatty because, let's be honest, it was Beatty who allowed Rodney and Nelson to be built instead of the F-3s. It was Beatty who accepted the Washington Naval Treaty. So all these are options. If Rodney and Nelson had been fast capital ships, well, Gneisenau might well not have escaped from Rodney if she'd been an F-3 with 9 15-inch 50s and a top speed of, well, let's consider the F-3 class. Open up my notes. F3 had a top speed of 28.5 knots or 29 knots roughly. Now, that's on 96,000 shaft horsepower, and that's with the boilers produced available in 1921. With upgraded boilers, which you could have got in 1930s, that could have been a little bit faster. And remember, she would have had the free shafts, which would have enabled her to do that. Whereas the F2, which would have had 6 15-inch 50s, that would have had a top speed of 30 knots light and 112,000 shafts horsepower to begin with. Goodness knows what that would have achieved if it had been upgraded. But you know, basically the F2s are in super renowned. The F3, that's a fast battleship. And the real problem for Operation Berlin, and I would say this honestly with Operation Berlin, the real problem for Operation Berlin is that it makes Operation Rheinberg a lot more difficult. And Rheinberg, of course, is what Bismarck and Jürgen come out. Because the thing is, it provides the British with lessons of what their problems are. The British start to learn what their faults are. And yes, when Bismarck comes out, she's a more powerful individual ship than Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. But she's also only one ship, so they can form their pairs. And if you consider also, you have King George V going around with HMS Victorious. So theoretically, if she'd gone one way, she might have been one-on-one with King George V. And Tovey wasn't worried about that. Tovey was not worried if she ended up going the other way and ended up one-on-one with King George V. He felt King George V on her own could take Bismarck. And they have lots more aircraft wandering around. They have lots more things worked up to wander around. But honestly, the ending result of Operation Berlin is that Rheinberg is far harder and even more likely to fail than it was when it was originally planned. And you have to do the Channel Dash. And the thing is, if you'd waited for the launch Rheinberg till after the Channel Dash, you could have done something with Scharnhorst and Gneisenau as well, and maybe Tirpitz. And that would have been really quite sensible. But instead, the Germans just are incentivized by Operation Berlin, by its apparent success, despite the fact it failed to achieve its goals of taking out an HX convoy or an SL convoy. They're sort of conned into believing it's possible and viable, so they go and do Operation Rheinberg. And they lose Bismarck because of that. Yes, that's perhaps less of a problem than other scenarios, but it's not something you wanted to lose. So the Kriegsmarine put like 20,000 miles into their capital ships. How much did the Iron had to run theirs to be favourable to the Germans? 100, 150k? Well, the Germans, British Iron capital ships sailing that much. The Iron were sailing a lot, but also the Iron are maintaining far more. How do I put this polite? German ships in maintenance are prime targets for the Royal Air Force with heavy bombers, and they do go. The Royal Navy are pushing them. But the British can send their ships for refit in America, in Canada. They can also do them in parts of the UK, which get less pressure, but, you know, they are doing that. Are you running in your sleep? Gilda, forcing convoys to be laid until an escorting battleship is available had a noticeable disruptive impact, so it's not that clear a victory. That is true. Honestly, if you can force British to delay convoys till they have an escorting battleship, that is a victory in delaying those convoys. But again, here is the thing: if you, as I was explaining earlier at the beginning of this, you have Shameless and Eisenhower out as a pair. You have to have one battleship per convoy. Any one, pretty much do. You have Bismarck out as a solo. You have a battleship per convoy. That's what the British do actually have while Bismarck's out. They have battleships with critical convoys. If you send out all three, as Robert Dennis just put out, so what if no Operation Berlin, so the British don't take them lessons and all three ships sail at once? If all three ships sail at once, and they sail with the three heavy cruisers as well, Scheer, Ewen and Hipper. If they take all 6 ships out at once, then think about it. Can you guarantee sticking one battleship with any convoy it has the same chance as that Shameless and Eisenhower? No. The British might start losing whole convoys. They might, have suffered loss of a convoy and its ship. Yes, they'll probably be damaged, but will they manage to capture them? They don't know. So the British might be forced not to run convoys at all under that scenario, if those 3 are all out together, and concentrate their battleships to go and hunt them down, because again, remember, they'll need packs of 4. For Shameless and Eisenhower, they're forming packs of 3 battleships. For Bismarck, they form packs of 2. If you have 3 German battleships out together, you're forming packs of 4. So that's again going to be a scenario of, do you put the battleships with the convoys, or do you form them into the pack of 4? But I'm asking, if the capital ship's building are not being led by Churchill, how much would this change the operation? You probably have a lot more of the King George V's ready, and they would have been in service longer. You'd also have more of the illustrious class ready, and they'd have been in service longer. You probably have the Implacables entering service, and you might even have the Lions entering service. In which case you have far more fast capital ships available, which means you have far more to form those packs. And you probably, conversely, also have far more ships you can use for escorting convoys, because if you don't need to have Queen Elizabeth being a extra vessel of your attack force, your fighting force, you can have her as a convoy escort. Because there is a reason they're using the older 15-inch gun ships as a convoy escorts. So you could have had if you have those ships available, then you probably have another convoy having Queen Elizabeth with it, etc. H. Ferdinand. If it wasn't Prince of Wales, always unlucky ships, and had been another King George V after Hood went down, I'd have bet on her against Bismarck, as the Norfolk and Suffolk could have dealt with Prince Eugen. Rheinenberg. I was asking you, Rheinberg? Rheinberg. Oh, Rheinbung. Yeah. Yes, it is Bung. Sorry. I misreading my notes. To be fair, in my defense, I have literally had a pair of Pop-Tarts all day for my food. So, I know that I'm making excuses now, but everything I'm reading looks like burger. Okay? I'm hungry. And you cannot get takeaways in Cornwall. Which is it, Prince of Wales still mission killed Bismarck, was actually the winner. Yes, you can argue that one. That is certainly true. She had this mission kill Bismarck, and that's what leads to her getting torpedoed. And once she's torpedoed, her days are over, basically. The problem is that King George V was covering the unfairest passage of repulse. True. Hello, Jack Ray. Hello, did you mention hamburger? Stop being cruel. By the way, if you want to do a fun thing, okay, if you are in the UK, do what I sort of like to do is I like to take nearest major city, turn on delivery or Uber Eats, And I like to work. I start putting in towns slightly further and further away from our city, and wait until you don't no longer have delivery options. Yes, Stafford will be reminding me to eat better, and I should eat better. But today we went, as said, for the second viewing of the house. I've been sorting out videos and prepping them. I've been sorting out stuff for my mum and sister, and I just haven't had a chance. Just haven't had a chance. And the trouble is, I ate my frozen pizza last night. So I had pizza in reserve for emergencies, and I ate it last night and didn't manage to get to the. I didn't manage to get to the store yesterday or today. So yeah. And hello, Jack Ray. I think I said so, but I can't remember. Where is this house? I'm in Cornwall. Where I'm staying currently is, again, not far from Truro. Connors, revisiting my knowledge problem, how many multiple does the Kriegsmarine and the force to capitalise to wear them down with our own repair maintenance advantage? If you could, the Germans could have caused real problems for the British if they'd maxed out their force deployment. And I realised the fuel and other issues, but bear with me. If the Germans had managed to put the fuel together and force together, and been able to send out a major task force, Tirpitz had waited for Bismarck and Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. You know, if Bismarck had waited for Tirpitz and Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, which is actually what Lutyens had wanted at one point. If they had that force, that is going to cause tremendous trouble, because think about it from the British perspective. What are your 5 fast ships available? What are your 5 fast ships? Let's put it this way. Tirpitz... If we don't do Operation Berlin, and we're just waiting for Tirpitz to be available, she's commissioned in February 1941. She's not actually ready or actually working, because of the Germans commissioning before testing's all done and all workup's done, until really I would say she is not really ready for operations until July 1941. I would go for July 1941. So if they had delayed it to July 1941 and had sent out Tirpitz, Bismarck, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, think what the British have available. By that point, Rodney could well be undergoing refit in America, so she's not available. In terms of the King George V class, if we're talking July 1941, Duke of York isn't commissioned until August 1941. So you have Prince of Wales and King George V. Now, admittedly, Prince of Wales will have been commissioned in January, so January, February, March, April, May, June, July. She might actually be worked up and fine by this point, and not still have people from the constructors' yard on board her. King George V will be up to service, but again, you're not getting Anson or Howe till 1942, and Duke of York isn't commissioned until August 1941, so she's not available. So you've lost Rodney, and King George V and Prince of Wales are your 2 fast ships. You've then got Hood, which is in dire need of a refit, and was in dire need of a refit when Bismarck turned up. So in the nicest way again, if you wait for Operation. You're waiting from not May, not June, but July. The odds are Hood might be in refit as well. So if Hood's in refit and Rodney's in refit, then the Royal Navy's fast ships that they can organise round are Repulse, Renown, King George V, and Prince of Wales. Do you want to fight Bismarck, Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau with King George V, Duke of York, well, King George V, Prince of Wales, Renown, and Repulse? Now, yes, you'll go, well, the British will have aircraft carriers. Well, yes, they will, but they'll also have to form a slow group. So they'll have to form a slow group of whatever they've got available at that point as well, which are going to be Arc-type battleships and Nelson. So they're going to have a slow force and a fast force. Because the slow force won't be able to catch the Germans, but they might be able to join in a battle after the battle's been joined if the Germans are sufficiently damaged. You're going to need aircraft carriers with all of them. It's just, that's a nightmare scenario for the British. If the Germans just wait, they could absolutely overwhelm the Royal Navy with their ships, and they could have, again, you can't leave one battleship with a convoy to defend it against 4 German ones. So you'd have to not run the convoys. All it requires is a little bit of waiting. And it's not as if their admirals weren't saying that. Lütjens was saying this. Lots of admirals are saying this in Germany, but they're not listening. Rodney's in for... Rodney would be in June, July time for its repair, its refit in the States. Nelson, probably not in for repair. She was out wandering around in this period, so she'd probably still be out wandering at that period. It's not the case, though, because, yes, you can say the larger the force they throw, the quicker they're going to get found. No, the ocean is still, doesn't matter. It's a convoy principle. The ocean is vast. If you're spread out over a wider space, there are more chances of you spotting something. If you're all grouped together as one force, you're a problem. You're just another speck in the ocean. And the thing is, it does make refueling, it makes all those things more difficult. I agree, Michael Cooch. I'm just saying, it would also mean that for the British, it would have been an absolute nightmare. Because, what are they going to do? HFM. Problem with Cornwall, it's very pretty, but well, kind of isolated. You're going to be 40 or 50 miles away from motorway, but it takes 2 to 3 hours to get some places. Yeah. Not the part of Cornwall I'm in. It's actually quite close. And as I say, it's not... Now, that's the fun thing. Where we are. It'll come soon. There's enough university students growing up in this area that, frankly, you'll have Deliveroo arrive soon enough. But no, Deliveroo is not where I am. That's one. What did the Baraki and the Aminga code have an effect if they waited until that was ready? Not so much, because again, especially if the group's operating close together, They're not going to be using radio signals. They're going to be, well, actually no, this is Lutyens. He might actually be using radio signals, but if he's being sensible, he'll be using flags and flash signals. Would it have caused more problems if all four big ships had sorted independently in close succession? Four separate groups, each of which needed a pair to deal with properly. Yes, it would arguably. Yes and no, because it's going to sound strange, but if you're sorting them as separate groups, you're going to crowd up the routes in the Atlantic very quickly. So I did do a discussion of what happens if they sorted Bismarck and Tirpitz from Germany out through Norway, and if they sortie Charnos and Gneisenau from France, and have them as two pairs. That's a very scary scenario. That causes the British almost much trouble, because there's also the British have to prepare as if those four join up together. So basically, the British have to prepare as if they're becoming four, but actually they're dealing with two pairs wandering around. And yes, they would go with the carrier task force to try and slow the Germans down, my cooch. They would do that. The British would be doing that. But the British don't have enough carriers really going around, because they have their carriers all over the place and they keep getting damaged as well. You have to remember, late 1941 is not good for the Royal Navy. Now, Ark Royal isn't sunk till November 1941, so they'd still have her around. But yes. And you have limited for resources, especially after the pause of capital ship construction and carrier construction. I was asking you, guess if Charnos are available, then Prince Eugen would not come. Heavy cruisers, no escort for battleships. Still, 3 ships would require 2 battleships in convoys got to counter that. At least 2. At least 2. And you think about that, then you've got to decide whether you're placing 2 ships there, or, you know, which 2 ships are you placing, and also what's the problem going to be for you supplying enough forces to do the convoys. Because let's say you lose 2 R's and you use... Well, trouble is the British had lost Royal Oak and they'd lost... Well, they hadn't lost Barham yet again, because he's also November 1941. So they've still got Barham wandering around, but they have lost Royal Oak, and that's a big loss for them, because Royal Oak was the semi-modernized R class. So they basically have the 4 remaining R's. They have Barham and they have Malaya to use. That's basically their convoy escorts, unless they start using their far ships, which are all the ships they're supposed to be using to hunt them down. Again, they've got HMS Nelson running around, but Nelson is their big ship, which they can guarantee. Nelson and Rodney are their big ships, which are supposed to be able to kill anything that they come across. Rob Dennett, what if the Italians saw this simultaneously? Then the RN are crying. In the 4-ship alternate history timeline, the Italians could probably put a couple of capital ships, 2 to 3 capital ships, into a group and sortie as well at the same time. And Cunningham would then have to focus on that. But that would mean there would be no chance of any Mediterranean forces. And if it's going to depend which way they go. If the Italians head... If the Italians head east, they head into the Mediterranean fleet, which Cunningham can do something about. If the Italians head west, that's going to put pressure on Force H. Because are they doing a dash for Gibraltar? Can you withdraw Force H from where they are? In which case, are Renown? Do you have to send Nelson down to secure Gibraltar? Do you have to send a Renown and Force H and Ark Royal? Do they have to stay there? You know, it's very easy to say if they go east of the Mediterranean, they get Cunningham, potentially. But if they go west of the Mediterranean under this scenario, what forces are going to be there to fight them? And they don't have to try and force Gibraltar, but they could attack Gibraltar and cause problems. That's good. I was more thinking if Kriegsmarine HQ is sending out instructions for areas of patrol, Western approaches HQ could try to divert the convoys like they did with the U-boats. The trouble is that doesn't work out like that because Lutyens is there. So he's making decisions. Yes, he's coordinating to an extent with headquarters, but he gets given the information, decides to go where off to go hunting based on his prior instructions, not on things that coordinate. So they're not telling him where to go like they are with submarines. Hello, Sir Crane. Actually, to be honest, late 1941 to mid-1942 was about the worst time in the whole war for British forces. They're not likely going to lose the war, but all of them are close to the lowest ebb. Yes. So actually, you hold back those forces for just a few months. You do a combined effort, and the British are in the real trouble. And as I said, the difference between going in May 1941 with Bismarck, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau, that's scary. Waiting till July 1941, taking Tirpitz long, doesn't matter if you then break up into two pairs once you're out in the Atlantic. But you have two admirals out there probably because you have it able to be divided up into two pairs, which is going to mean you're less reliant on Lutyens. But think about who the second admiral might be. That's an interesting question. Who are you going to send out as Lutyens' deputy? Because he'll be the senior commander because of what's happened in Norway, etc., and his promotion since. But who are you going to send out as his deputy? It's a lot of interest. Anyway. So, next week is the last of the Year of Technology videos. It's the Year of Technology non-Christmas videos, which is Why No More Battleships? Which is an interesting video. I think I have written already the slides, and I'm going to record that probably tomorrow. That's good. Would you split the battleships by class or one of each class per group? Probably split them by class. Have the Scharnhorst go off in one direction and Bismarck and Tirpitz go off in another direction. But I wanted to get to this because we talked about revisionism earlier. Revisionism can start very early. This is produced from the Atlantic magazine. It was with feverish energy that the dreadnought, once wrung from a reluctant board, was thrown together. It was constructed within a year and with the utmost secrecy, and its appearance created an unexampled storm. The service was rent in twain by the problems raised by the new ship, and Lord Charles Beresford headed the attack on new theories involved. But the effect on the naval service in England was trifling to the effect in Germany. The launching of the dreadnought was the launching of a bolt against the German navy. It was not merely the question of superiority of the all-big gun ship that was the issue. It is true that if the type prevailed, England had got a new start of an invaluable character. But there was another point far more important. The Kiel Canal had just been finished. It was a great achievement of engineering that linked the Baltic last with the North Sea and gave the Navy the absolute essential of free, unobstructed movement in German waters. But a ship of the type of dreadnought could not pass through the Kiel Canal, and nearly 10 years must elapse before the canal could be so deemed as to receive it. In a word, Admiral Fisher had put the Kiel Canal out of action for a decade. and in doing so had enormously depreciated the value of the German Navy as a fighting machine. For a time, Admiral von Tirpitz was nonplussed between the alternative of building ships that would not go through the Kiel Canal and not building ships of equal power those of the British Navy. When at last he took the plunge, he had to make up for lost time. It is said that he paid £40,000 for the plans of Dreadnought, but by the time he had got them, they were largely worthless. For Dreadnought was frankly a trial ship made to discover how such a ship could be built, and it's equally generally assumed that von Tirpitz lost as much as he gained by the purloining of the plans. The result was that while the British Navy was correcting all the deficiencies revealed by the trial ship, Germany was laying down several ships according to the uncorrected specifications. Revisionism. It starts early, and it is broad. Charles Beresford had many complaints about Fisher, many ones, but by the time of Dreadnought, he's not the leader of the opposition he once was. Robert Dennett. Oh, what about a 4-ship Rheinebung in December 41, post 4C, and the loss of Barham and Ark Royal, but before the USN is properly destroyed? Properly deployed. Well, the thing is, you have to ask yourself: without Rheinebung, without Rheinebung, are Barham and Ark Royal lost? Because what other operations are they doing? How does it affect the flow of things? Because you see, if I would argue, if you haven't had Rheinebung, then Ark Royal isn't where she is when she is. In which case, she might not have been lost and might be with Force Z. In which case, Force Z might not actually be lost. There's a good chance that one. Robert Dunn, Duke of York was still working out fully in December of 41 in real life. Yes. So you have a very interesting scenario. The question depends on whether Ark Royal is lost historically. If she isn't, Barham potentially probably still is, but Ark Royal might well not be. Doesn't take much difference in the circumstances for Ark Royal not to be lost, and that will change things dramatically. Well, in 1940, he's promoted to Contra-Admiral. So he ends up being a Vice Admiral in 1942. So in 1940, he's promoted to Contra-Admiral. So Hay, the question has been, for Lutyens Deputy, when did Hay get his flag? 1940. So he would have been about the right time and right position. So it could be, well, Hay would have, in that scenario of a 4-ship Operation Rheinebung, you would probably have, Lutyens would probably be in Bismarck still. Probably in Bismarck. Maybe in Tirpitz. Might go to Tirpitz, but he does tend to like the younger ship, the elder ship though. So, because he was in Gneisenau rather than Scharnhorst. So probably actually, I think probably goes to Bismarck still. But then you would have Hay in Gneisenau, in charge of the Scharnhorst. Okay, I'm going to record that tomorrow, and then re-record it Sunday, again Monday, twice, and again Tuesday. That's the problem with perfectionism. It does happen. Bertrand, the Atlantic's still right eye. Got to drive home. Good night. If you're not still alive, I'm gonna get home. Take care, Bichon. I doubt I will be. I will be going to see if I can find something for food. I'm sure we've got something somewhere. You know, worryingly, I've heard you talking in book readings enough that I generally read Tribals, Battles, and Airings, hearing your voice and the cadence instead of my own. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Gan, the Kiel Canal finally joined the Baltic North Sea. Skagerrak, I've been here a while, buddy. Yes, but it wasn't through German territorial waters. Alzaski, first of all, Hood is still around, probably refitted, and Prince of Wales probably gets worked out. And Rodney's would have been completed a refit by this point as well. Also, looking back to fixing the Axis Navy's videos, what if the Kriegsmarine had built several escort carriers instead of Graf Zeppelin and used those for convoy raids? They would need to be fast. For them to be, they couldn't be escort carriers like the Royal Navy and the US Navy had escort carriers. They would need to be fast ships. Okay? That's your major problem. You would need to be building fast ships, which means you need a supply of the engine and the turbines required for fast ships. Because they're going to need speed as their major defense. Yes, they could do it. Yes, it could be interesting. But how many aircraft they're going to be carrying and what effect it's going to have on the Royal Navy is open to interpretation. No, Raleigh would never let me share his bickies. His bickies are for him. I'll probably try and find some food and then pop onto Discord for a bit before I do some late night recording. So, I would say I'll probably be on Discord in about. Well, if we finish this in the next few minutes, I'll probably be on Discord in about. Let's say 10 past 11, 23:10 hours. It would be interesting. I know. I'm going to do ask for final questions. I hope you enjoyed this. It's not been quite as prepped and fluent as I'd hoped it would be, but last 2 days have been interesting. And as I said, I hope I'll see some of you on Discord in about 10 to 11 for I'll probably be on 20 minutes to answer any questions and chat to people. Thank you very much for watching, as ever. And the kilobytes are collapsing again. Thank you, Leslie Mitchell. Thank you, Mike Cooch. Thank you, H. Verdun. Thank you, Captain Seaforth. Thank you, Carl Gasberg. Thank you, Robert Dennett. Thank you, Alistair Crow. Thank you, Joss Funk. Thank you, Abelzaski. Thank you, Malaga. Thank you, DG40. Thank you, H. Verdun. Thank you, Jack Ray. Thank you, Melanie1640. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Garris the Brit. Thank you, everyone who's been on here. Colin Cameron. Blackburn Maximus. George Newman. Gilder. Thank you. Thank you, Paul Amos. Thank you, Mole's Revenge. Thank you, everyone who's been on it. GTZUG and Copfour Show. Copfoul Tishal. I think that's correct. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aaron Duke of Etchington. Thank you, everyone who's been on here this evening, and thank you for chatting away. Hope you enjoyed, and as said, thank you. And let's see, what else we got coming up this week? Next week we have the Battle of Sinop, which will be on the Thursday evening. And then on next week, the following week, if not Pearl Harbor, we start in December once. Hopefully you've been enjoying the recorded videos, the comment response videos, etc. coming in. There's more of those loaded up. There's 3 more comment response videos loaded up, and there's 3 more due to be recorded to be loaded up. I've got 9 to load a record before we actually finish this house hunt. And potentially be going back to pack up the house. We can always hope. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and thank you again for all your support. It really wouldn't be possible to do all this without you. Take care, and have a nice evening. Bye. And goodbye, good night from the poodle as well. As you can see, he's currently zonked after doing a lot of heavy work today. You hungry? You're always hungry.